We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys! Here is part 4 of What If Naruto Became a Jonin Sensei. He was left broken from the death of his parents. The one man who had salvaged the pieces burned to ashes in front of his eyes. At times, he questioned the meaning of life. But who knows? Maybe these 3 little genin might show him the answer. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 7, The Test Part 3. Fuin choked on her own blood as she stared with wide eyes at the indifferent Jonin in front of her. She futilely grabbed her throat in a vain attempt to stem the rushing liquid gushing out of her throat. Wordlessly she dropped to her knees, her fine dress reduced to tatters. She still managed to sneer in her final moments and gurgled out a curse at her cold-hearted killer. Kurenai's gaze bore indifference as she gripped the bloody kunai in her hand, and with a flick of her wrist, the knife sailed through the air and buried itself with a thump, sinking to the handle into the head of the dying woman. Fuin's eyes were still wide open as slowly dropped backwards, her head hitting the dirt, as her body bent at an unnatural angle from its previous position. With a sigh, Kurenai let out a tired breath and slowly nursed her wounded shoulder. Blood dripped from the injured wound, staining her dress in its crimson color. She dispassionately watched the rapidly cooling body, a frown marring her beautiful face. For someone that reveled in strategy and traps, Fuin's arrogance was what led to her downfall. She wasn't all that strong other than having some powerful earth jutsu, but with a timely genjutsu she had gotten the slip on the arrogant woman and slit her throat. Though in the process, the woman had managed to get in a lucky swipe with a kunai and nicked her shoulder. The bitch! Feeling an incoming chakra source, she tensed before relaxing her body as a familiar green leotard appeared in swirl of leaves. Mato Guy looked relatively unharmed save for just looking a little tired. Clad over his shoulder was the large unmoving form of Fudo. Guy offered a wide smile in greeting but quickly became alarmed seeing the red stain on her shoulder. He promptly dropped the large body and appeared in front of her before she could blink. Kurenai-chan. You are wounded. Did your ghastly opponent prove too much for the flames of your youth? She sighed painfully as she promptly began to ignore Guy as he began to fuss over her. Glancing over his shoulder, she noticed the unnatural angle the neck of Fudo was bent in, and deduced the man had suffered a broken neck. Looking closer she could see his face was sunken in with an indent shaped almost like a fist. Glancing at Guy she saw the man was still spouting nonsense. But fear not. This wound in battle shows that your flames of youth burn all the more brighter. She cut him off as she slapped a hand over his mouth, effectively silencing him. Satisfied that the man was quiet, she removed her hand and gestured to the body that he dropped. How did you deal with the big guy? She questioned. Guy briefly turned to the man before he fixated her one of his stupidly wide grins and poised himself in his ridiculous pose. Paw! That brute was no match for the green beast. My flames of youth burned brighter than the morning sun. His diamond-hard skin proved ineffective for the flames of my morning peacock. He offered her thumbs up, finishing his explanation with a wink, smiling with teeth so white they gave a proverbial ping. Kurenai just stared silently for a few moments before she just shook her head and lightly giggled at his antics. She lightly patted his grinning cheek before she gestured to her wounded shoulder. Do you mind wrapping this for me, please? I don't have any medical equipment on me. Guy grinned and wordlessly nodded, gesturing for her to turn around. She tried to lift her hand to her hair to move it but let out a hiss as the movement riled her wound. Being the gentleman that he was, he lightly gripped her hair in a makeshift ponytail, moving the ebony locks out of the way. Using her other arm she gripped her hair and patiently waited as Guy took out some bandages. Tightly wrapping the wound and lifting her other arm a bit, to wrap it securely, Guy gave her a pat on the back when he finished. All done, Kurenai-chan. The wound will hold for now, but you should make one of our lovely medics heal that for you. She let her hair fall down her back, lightly shaking her head, tossing the long locks. Rolling her injured shoulder she nodded before she turned to grinning Jonin. Thanks, Guy. She offered sweetly. The green beast merely gave her his nice guy pose in reply, causing her to roll her eyes again. Glancing at the surrounding area she frowned. Have you heard from Asuma? Guy scratched his chin before shaking his head. No. I think he still deals with that red-haired vixen, a perfectly manicured eyebrow raised. Vixen? Guy grinned, oblivious to the rising ire of the red-eyed woman. Indeed. Though an enemy, that woman, Fuka I believe, is a deadly seductress of men. He frowned. I fear Asuma-kun might have fell prey to her deadly charms. Feeling her glare on him, he sheepishly backpedaled. Not that I don't believe he would, when he has such a lovely woman as yourself, Kurenai-chan. He offered with a careful smile. Before she could reply, the person of her internally ire appeared in swirl of leaves. Form singed and breathing harsh, Asuma stumbled into the clearing the two Jonin inhibited. He nearly dropped to his knees as he trudged in front of them, looking worse for wear. Leaning on his knees for support, he offered them a tired smile in greeting before he promptly dropped on his rear. Feeling an angry glare on his form, he lifted his face to meet Kurenai's glowing red eyes. Giving a look of confusion, he raised an eyebrow. What? She wordlessly pointed to his form. Asuma blinked before he gestured to the object in his hand. This? He raised a clump of bright red hair. Oh, this is just a trophy. That woman was a tough one. Can you believe that she could use all 5 elements? He let out a whistle. She was quite the challenge. He let out a hiss, grabbing his shin in pain. What the hell was that for? He bit out. Kurenai lowered her foot before gesturing to his face. I wasn't talking about that, you idiot. Her eyes narrowed at him. Why do you have lipstick on your lips? She folded her arms under her impressive bust. Oh. Asuma inwardly squirmed under her red gaze. Wiping his lips and glancing at his fingers, he could see leftover residue of the cherry-flavored lipstick Fuka had left on his lips. Shuddering at the realization he had been caught red-handed, he turned a glance to Guy for help but saw the Jonin had his back turned, his gaze focused on the particular scenery, having found the trees shifting in the wind interesting at the moment. Thinking quickly, he had to salvage the situation. Dropping the clump of hair and rising on shaky legs, he gave a sheepish grin, holding his hands out in a placating manner. Funny you should mention that, Kurenai-chan. You see, the woman had a particular jutsu that she used in the form of a kiss that sucks the chakra out of her victim. I had to resort. He stopped at the open palm that was raised. Wait 1 second, the tone of her voice caused his spine to crawl in fear. That woman, she gestured to the red hair on the ground, had a jutsu that sucks chakra out of her victims in the form of a kiss? The incredulous in her tone was palpable. And you fell for such a jutsu? A seasoned veteran, falling to the charms of a kiss? Asuma stuttered in response. It's not like that. I was overwhelmed by her jutsu and she trapped me. I thought she was going to finish me, but all she did was kiss me, and I felt my chakra being drained. Her glare didn't let up. And I managed to substitute myself in the nick of time and surprised her. I found out her weakness was her hair, and I scalped her with my chakra blades. It was in the fit of desperation. He was low in chakra and he struck out wildly, and managed to scalp her noggin clean off. When she still continued her glare, he let out a whimper. Believe me, it's not like I wanted to be kissed to death. Thinking about all the ways of dying, going out with a kiss wouldn't be so bad. He mistakenly grinned. Though, that wouldn't be so bad. His eyes widened when he realized the words that left his mouth. The only warning he got was Kurenai's furious form rocketing a slap to his head that made him twirl before he fell flat on his face. Ass! She shouted as she stomped off. You can sleep in your own bed for the next month. She called over her shoulder as she disappeared in a body flicker. Asuma only groaned as he rolled on his back, nursing the red hand print on his face. Seeing a shadow over his form, he looked up to see Guy's understanding face. Taking the hand that was offered, he was hauled up to his feet, strong hands lightly dusting off the dust that had accumulated on his vest. There Asuma-kun. Kurenai-chan will soon come around. But I advise being a little more subtle next time. Asuma nodded miserably, nursing his face. Shit, that hurt. Rolling his tongue, he let out a groan. I tasted blood with that one. Guy let out a hearty laugh. Indeed. An angry woman is a dangerous woman. Clapping a hand on his back, he gestured to space the angry woman had left. Now come. We must return to the village at once. I fear Naruto-kun may be in a bit of. Both Jonin shuddered as they felt a rapid chakra spike. Seconds later, a large pulse of lighting seeming to come from the village branched out in all directions. Moving fast, the wave of lighting rapidly expanded till it phased through the two Jonin, momentarily causing their limbs to go numb before it evaporated into the air. Wondering what the hell that was, the question died on Asuma's lips as he was pushed to ground by Guy in the nick of time, as even larger and far more destructive pulse of lightning thundered across the ground, leveling everything in its wake. Both Jonin shuddered as the wave swept over them and lightly shocked their forms. Waiting till the deadly wave had safely passed, Guy raised his head from the dirt. Glancing around, he could see that the surrounding landscape was charred and leveled. In the direction of the village he could see the beginnings of a large crater. Groaning as he raised himself to his feet, he lightly dusted himself off, before frowning and fingering the top of his head. His familiar bowl-cut hair was standing on end in complete disarray. Hearing a groan, he witnessed Asuma slowly raising himself up, his singed form in the same condition as his. Scratching his now spiky hair, Asuma cursed. What the fuck was that? Before Guy could reply, he felt a familiar incoming chakra source, and both Jonin had to immediately bite back their grins as Kurenai appeared. Her normally long wavy black hair was standing rigid on end, sticking straight up in the air. With a growl she stomped up to the two. What was that? She seethed. When both of them just stared at her, she snarled. What? Seeing Asuma immediately look away, hiding his grin, Guy schooled his face, biting down the laugh that threatened to spill out. That would be one of my eternal rivals' more destructive jutsu. The spiraling bolt. A devastatingly destructive attack, although that was the underpowered version, as he wasn't in that form. And what is this form you speak of? Kurenai curiously questioned, trying to smoothen her hair. If that so-called Rasen bolt that had just leveled the land was underpowered, she shuddered to think of the full-powered version. You can ask him yourself when you see him. For now we must make haste, and head to the village, or whatever is left of it. Nodding and waiting for Asuma to stand to his feet, the three took off in burst of speed. Moments before the large pulse of lighting that had branched out, Naruto slammed his hands together, purposefully destabilizing the concentrated ball of pure lightning chakra. Knowing the destructive nature of his attack, he inwardly mouthed a prayer for the nearby souls. Like time had frozen, he felt eyes on his form. He glanced up, and his Sharingan found the gaze of a little girl watching him in a nearby window. He could make out her curious brown eyes watching him with awe. Forgive me, he silently conveyed. Rasen bolt. With a shout, a large pulse of lighting rapidly emitted off his form and branched out widely. The Jinchuuriki, who were moments ago close enough to see the sweat on his brow, were suspended midair by the pulse. With a snarl they both struggled in their momentary suspension, growling before they were blasted back as Naruto opened his arms wide in arc, and with a roar, a devastating pulse rocketed them back. A crater instantly formed under his feet from the sheer power of the jutsu and rapidly expanded, swallowing nearby structures in its wake. Buildings in the surrounding area were torn apart by the raw pulse of lighting and disintegrated from the volume of volts. Villagers in hiding suffered the same fate. Hiding in nearby buildings, their attentions were roused as they witnessed the fight between trio. They had no time to run as the first pulse branched out and suspended them in midair, causing the hairs on their bodies to rise. The little girl had been watching Naruto since he appeared, stretched her hand to her mother in vain attempt to reach her as the second pulse came with the thundering sound of cracks. She let out a scream before a terrifying rumble followed. Brown eyes witnessed her mother open her mouth in a wordless scream, before her flesh disintegrated in front of her eyes. Her skin was first, followed by the muscle of her body, till all that remained was the bones. They too vanished with the roar of thunder, before all that was left was the very atoms of her cells to highlight her untimely demise. And like her mother, she was subjected to the same fate. Boom! And like a flash of lightning, the thundering bolt, true to its name, finished the attack with a sound that trembled the ground. In the middle of the large crater, Naruto fell to his knees, wheezing as he felt his chakra reserves dip. Lighting lightly danced around his form, and drips of perspiration that fell were quickly evaporated. That was more exhausting than I thought. He inwardly wheezed. With the aid of his hands he pushed himself up and stood on heavy legs. Glancing around at the destruction he had caused, he sighed as he took in the destroyed village. His attention diverted when he heard a growl. Glancing to his left, he saw the four-tailed form of Konohamaru slowly raise itself up. His cloak, despite offering advanced protection, was dripping red chakra, almost like it was bleeding from the severe attack it had just suffered. Parts of it were completely destroyed, showcasing his burnt skin underneath. Beside him, Sora's form was unmoving, singed black by the attack. Before Naruto could react, one of Konohamaru's four tails pierced right through the boy's body. With a snap, Sora awakened, letting out a scream that chilled Naruto to his core. Like a pump draining liquid, Konohamaru's tail glowed red and the remaining chakra sealed inside Sora was forcefully sucked out. His previous injuries were rapidly healed as the bloody red form solidified and once again fully covered his body. Sora shuddered and began to gurgle on blood as his form became extremely pale. Like a parasite, the tail continued to drain, and Naruto let out a shout as Sora's body became emaciated till his bones were visible underneath his skin. Chakra swirled in his hand as Naruto charged forward, the rapidly spinning ball solidifying and letting out a distinct hum as it reached full capacity. Rasen, his Sharingan widened as Konohamaru's tail flickered and the body of the Sora was thrown forward into his path. Already exhausted from his last jutsu and the combination of trying to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto couldn't react in time as he collided with bone-jarring force with the small body. A sickening crack was heard as Sora's unmoving body hit his stomach head first with enough force to pause Naruto in his blitz of speed. Naruto tasted blood and was sure a few ribs had just cracked. In a move of desperation, he had moved the Rasengan out of the way that would have reduced the boy's body to mincemeat. The momentary act had cost him as the boy's neck instantly broke during collision and left him wide open. Konohamaru's form rocketed forth, leaving cracks in his wake as he tackled Naruto with such force that Sora's body in between the two bent midair at an unnatural angle and the sound of his back shattering echoed through the air. The duo crashed into the edge of the crater before bouncing out of it and landing in a heap near a leveled street of the village. Naruto let out a cough of blood staining his mask with a dark hue. Unrelenting, Konohamaru's form hovered over him, swiping down sharp claws ready to cleave his face in half. An inch from his face, Naruto's hand shot out and halted the glowing appendage. South close was the intervention, that a red finger touched his headband and burned right through the metal. The glove on his hand instantly burned off at contact. Naruto let out a hiss as his hand holding the Jinchuriki's wrist was suffering the same corroded effect. With a snarl, he struck forward, with the still spinning Rasengan in his hand, aiming for his face. Returning the favor, Konohamaru's clawed hand shot out and wrapped around his wrist, halting the attack, as sharp claws embedded themselves into his flesh. This time Naruto couldn't contain the shout of pain that came from his lips. A struggle of dominance ensued and both tried to overpower one another. Ah! Fuck! The pain was unbearable. Both his hand and wrist were suffering fourth-degree burns as he felt corrosive chakra beginning to erode his bone, long since burning through the underlying muscle and fat. Giving a roar, he powered through and the Rasengan in his hand kept up its spin as it began to edge closer to Konohamaru's face. Inch by agonizing inch, Naruto slowly began to overpower the Jinchuriki. He kept up his focus, ignoring the small body nestled into his lap that was corroded to bones from their proximity. Despite the intense struggle, Naruto's Sharingan glanced down at him, seeing the Sora's face fixed into a small smile as the remaining half of his face was eroded down. If Sora's body hadn't landed on top of him, the entire front side of his body would have been eroded by now. Push, damn it! Push! He groaned to himself. His Rasengan edged ever closer. The seemingly endless white eyes narrowed, before the four tails that had been swirling stood on edge, turned, poised and ready, to pierce right through him. With a desperate burst of chakra, four chains shot of his form and wrapped around the tails, binding them. In his weakened state, he failed to notice the chains lacked their golden shine and reflected his form appearing rusted and chipped. They still held strong against the strain, but the chime of cracks were noticeable. When the chains didn't respond to his mental command to drain the chakra, he knew his situation just went from bad to fucked. Fuck! Come on, Konohamaru, fight it! He yelled desperately, feeling his reserves begin to plummet. The Rasengan that had been so close to his head was slowly losing ground, and he snarled as he began to get overpowered. His chakra reserves were so low that spinning ball slowed itself to a stop, slowly evaporating as his chakra no longer flowed enough to power it. The sweat on his brow was rapidly evaporating as the intense heat of Konohamaru's four-tailed state drew ever closer. His Sharingan rapidly spun in his eye, searching for anything that would provide a momentary lapse to halt the Genin. And then he heard it. The feral Jinchuriki seemed to let out a howl that sounded more like a groan of pain. His mouth opened wide, exposing his glowing white throat in a roar that rumbled the earth. He lowered his head, ears that had been standing straight, lowering till they touched the sides of his forehead. Wide-eyed, Naruto stared numbly as Konohamaru's mouth moved slowly. Sen. The clawed hands holding his wrist released their corrosive grip, and Naruto hastily let go of the corrosive appendage. Glancing at his own appendages, he had to bite back the shudder that wanted to rush out of his lips as he stared at blackened bone. It was only thanks to his last reserves of reinforcing his limbs with chakra that the corrosive burn didn't eat his limbs right off. Another growl snapped his attention to Konohamaru as the dark red, almost black chakra around his eyes slowly receded and the white pools for eyes slowly burned away to reveal familiar brown. The skin around his eyes was an angry red, rapidly healing but at the same time suffering the same corrosion that he had been subjected to. Sensei. I hear you, Konohamaru, I hear you. Not wasting any time, Naruto pushed the last of his reserves to his Sharingan and tried to force the Jinchuriki into a Genjutsu-induced sleep. Their eyes connected and then everything went dark. Where am I? The question echoed eerily outward, sounding like his own voice was coming from all around him. Naruto pushed himself up, dazed and confused, looking around the dirty murky waters that he had found himself laying in. Raising himself to his feet, he observed the area he was in, staring wide-eyed at the numerous plants and trees that surrounded the area. Broken trees littered the area, looking dead. The plants that he had been observing were withered and dried, looking like they had never seen the sun. The water was so dirty he couldn't make out his own feet in the ankle-high water. A wetland. More importantly, a swamp. Naruto slowly trekked through the muddy waters, glancing around for any signs of life, or more importantly a brown-haired Genin. But as he made his way through the dirty waters, he saw nothing more than the trees and plants that stood silently. Swamps were supposed to be teeming with life, but the silence was as still as the dead. Not even any insects. Curiously, the swamp was filled with an eerie orange glow. More saturated with the color of red was the glow, casting the illusion eerily reminiscent to blood. But there were no sources of light in sight. The hell? The further he walked, the more the glow became brighter, almost as if was slowly beckoning him from the blanketing darkness. Glancing up at the sky for the first time, expecting to see something normal, he froze. That sky wasn't normal at all. Blanketing the entire horizon, a pitch black covered the entire sky as far as his eye could see. Slowly moving across the dark abyss were clouds the color of blood, standing out against the black with their supernatural glow. But even that didn't make him freeze. What really caught his stare was the large circle stationed like a sentry in the sky. That was no sun. The red of the moon was the same bloodied color as the clouds. Only it shined brighter and highlighted the clearing he walked into with a dark red. He didn't even realize he walked into an open clearing standing in lake. The trees surrounded the area as if trying to contain something. He slowly took steps forward, on wide alert as a feeling of dread welled up in the pit of his stomach. His hand came up to his shoulder, gripping the handle of his blade tightly. His wrist caught his eye and his mouth opened in confusion. The burning sensation of the corrosive chakra that had been plaguing his body had been vacant the moment he arrived. Glancing at his appendages, his brow furrowed when he saw perfectly unmarred flesh highlighted red by the light of the moon. His gloves were long since gone, burned to ashes by the corrosive chakra, but it seemed as if he was healed. Fingering his headband, he still felt the indent of the hole Konohamaru had made when his finger had managed to touch him. What the hell? He mouthed the question out loud in a silent whisper. But the words echoed outwards, pulsing the waters into a phantom ripple. It felt like an eternity but was really a matter of seconds. The sound of his voice echoed onward till the dead silence that paranoid him from the start returned. The ripples in the water had stopped, but the murky waters that had once been too filthy to see through slowly began to clear. At the edge of the clearing the water cleared first, slowly spreading downwards, receding the dark waters with a clear blue. The image of bars, very giant bars, became clear and eyes went wide when he realized the clearing of water he was standing in was really a cage. He had been standing on a cage? He couldn't ponder the question any longer as something beckoned him to look down, and he felt fear paralyze his body as two huge blood-red eyes opened, and instantly fixated on his form. Before he could blink he was on the other side of the clearing, clambered up into the safety of the trees. He laid a hand on his chest, trying to calm his racing heart as the organ thundered against his ribs like it was about to explode. His breathing was fast and his form was shaking. He hadn't felt so much fear in his entire life. Those eyes shone with such an intense burn of hate and malevolence. The raw killing intent that he felt paralyzed him with fear. And all that beast had done was glance at him. He breathed deeply, inhaling through his nose and exhaling through his mouth. He needed to calm his body down lest he would go into shock. He gripped his fist tightly, closing his eyes and focusing himself to be calm. Digging deep into his reserves, he found that they were replenished at full capacity, and soon that comforting warmth that had boosted him when he fought the Gobi Jinchuriki settled itself into his stomach. Opening his eyes, the look of fear was replaced with one of leveled calm. If his father had taken on this beast, so could he. He inwardly told himself it was the surprise of the area, and paranoia of traveling through the unknown that had caused him to leave his shadow behind in fright as he leapt back onto the clear waters. He stopped himself before he could take another step. Shit, what if grabs me through the bars? He could kiss his ass goodbye as he would be dinner faster than those unfortunate souls in that horrible shark movie. Better be safe than sorry. He told himself as a golden chain shot out and attached itself to the tallest tree he could find. On the other side of the clearing he spotted a tree of adequate height, and another chain shot out attaching itself to the top. Shortening them, he felt himself rise up slowly into the air, and his body slowly began to move to center of the waters, dangling above. He tried to ignore the blood-red eyes that watched his every move, silently watching with patience. He felt like prey, dangling above a shark, as one wrong move could cost him, and he would fall into awaiting jaws. The thought caused him a slip of control and he lost his perfectly maintained balance. He felt his world spin as he tumbled downwards. Fuck! A third chain shot out from his back, blindly latching on to the closest tree and stopped him dead, his face hovering inches from the water. In fright he had snapped his eyes shut expecting to be fox food about now, but when he felt his chain had secured him cracked his Sharingan eye open. Fuck! The shout was loud as he recoiled back causing his chains to send him bouncing in the air. The Kyubi had opened its mouth wide, exposing endless rows of sharp teeth confident that he would have dropped in its awaiting jaws. Naruto bounced around, before he willed his chains to shorten again, leveling him comfortably. The third chain had provided him perfect balance now, and he could will himself to relax for a moment. He wiped the sweat from his brow breathing deeply at what was a close escape from death. He thought he should have seen the look on your face. Naruto started downwards as the Kyubi regarded him with its red eyes. It would seem the Uzumaki blood runs strong through you, Naruto. Naruto stared numbly as he regarded the beast that had come in contact with since his birth. Kyubi. At the mention of his name, it grinned showcasing teeth the same size as the largest tree he had seen since coming here. Come closer, Naruto. No need to be shy. It grinned again gripping the iron bars with its huge hands, the claws on its fingers longer than his body. 9 tails, larger than the Hokage Tower, swayed in a hypnotizing manner behind it. A cloud blocked out the glowing red of the moon, painting a picture of 2 red dots belonging to the giant monstrosity glowing hungrily as they observed his form. Come closer. There wasn't enough distance between them. I'm fine right here. Naruto quipped. I believe we can have a suitable conversation from this distance. He heard a sound that resembled drumming with an edge of malevolence and realized the beast had just laughed. Though I want to, I couldn't harm you even if I tried. Showing proof, its hand slipped past the bars, palm pressed up against the waters, like it was an invisible wall encasing it inside. In the center of the waters a symbol glowed, showcasing the kanji 4 seal. When the 9 tails removed its palm, the seal vanished. See, now come. We have much to discuss, you and I. One giant finger beckoned him, bending slowly, its long nails scraping against the water. Naruto stared for a few moments, the tomos of his Sharingan slowly twirling in his eye. Wordlessly he reached into his pouch and withdrew a kunai. With a lazy flicker of his wrist he let gravity do the work and the knife dropped to clear waters. His eye narrowed as it bounced along the waters, meeting resistance, before it settled resting on the invisible wall. Red and blue met glowing red, before he sent a mental command to his chains to slowly begin to lengthen. Heeding the command, the chains expanded, letting Naruto slowly begin to descend toward the bars. The fox grinned before it masked its face into indifference as Naruto's feet reached the waters. Slowly bending down to retrieve his kunai, all the while keeping his eyes on the fox, he allowed the chains to slowly recede back inside him. The sound of sliding metal penetrated the silence, and when the last of the chains slipped inside of him he stared the Kyubi down face to face, in dead silence. Now closer, he could see that the bars didn't really provide a cage, as the Kyubi's giant form simply floated in water. There was no distinguishable ground underneath and his ocular vision could see no end to the murky depths. A horizontal, endless cage. The sight was thought-provoking. His observation was interrupted as the Kyubi let out a small growl before lowering its face closer to his, large eyes pinned to the special orb in his left socket. How did you come to possess that eye? It came out as more of a growl than a question, and Naruto could hear the underlying hate. "Wouldn't you like to know?" He fired back, noticing the way its eyes narrowed to slits. Eyes more sinister than my own should not be handed lightly, boy. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that. Seeing his confusion, the fox grinned, its red eyes seeming to shine with an intense malice. It seemed to draw itself closer, putting its large snout right under his feet. "I sense it, I can feel the same chakra from that eye." "Yes, that eye belongs to him." Naruto's eyes had narrowed and he found himself leaning forwards, kneeling down, so he could stare the Kyuubi right in its large eyes. "Whose eye does belong to?" The beast grinned, eyes seeming to shine with mirth before they glowed. "The same man, on that day." Naruto was going frustrated. "What day? Whose eye does this belong to?" Kakashi never told him how he got his eye. He had pestered the man countless times, but he would never tell him. "Who?" he shouted, feeling dread. "Wouldn't you like to know?" It stated smugly, echoing his previous words. "It wouldn't be fun if I tell you all the answers, that way I at least know you'll come back." Naruto hissed, but words on the tip of his tongue froze as he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. His sword was instantly drawn, and he stood in stance, poised ready to strike. His eyes widened, and his sword nearly fell from his grip as the floating body of Konohamaru emerged from the waters. His face was upwards, but Naruto still didn't know if he drowned, and he was hovering over the Genin in the blink of an eye. Sheathing his sword, he tenderly held the unconscious Genin, scooping him out of the waters. Going down on one knee, and resting the boy's head on his thigh, he put his ear against his chest, and breathed a sigh of relief when he felt a steady heartbeat. He was breathing. But his breaths were shallow. His usually fair skin was pale, and there were heavy bags under his eyes. "Konohamaru." Naruto gently shook him. Come on buddy, wake up." He gave some firm shakes, but nothing seemed to rouse him. Holding him in one arm, he used his free hand to lightly slap his face. "Konohamaru." His voice echoed loudly through the silence, but Konohamaru didn't so much as stir. "The boy is weak." The voice snapped his attention back to the center of the lake, and Naruto's eyes narrowed at the smug tone. Hoisting Konohamaru securely in his arms, Naruto walked forward till he stood staring down at the Kyuubi's glowing eyes. "His mind is strong, but his body is weak," it reiterated. Naruto's eyes narrowed down at it. "What do you mean by that?" The beast grinned before it hoisted up a claw finger and pointed horizontally. Frowning, but following the direction, Naruto glanced at trees and waters, seeing nothing. Turning his attention back to the beast, his eyes reflected his confusion. "What?" he bit out, tired of its games. It had long since rested its fingers back on gripping the bars, but its grin this time spoke volume. Its long pink tongue stretched out and slowly licked the waters right under his feet. Dread filled him, and he glanced briefly at the beast before he turned his attention back to direction the beast had pointed. Still seeing nothing, his Sharingan rapidly flickered, trying to find something, anything that had looked strange or could have labeled what the beast was pointing at. He trailed off as he finally noticed something. At the water's edge, by the bank, something caught his attention. His Sharingan spun rapidly as it tried to take in every detail, and soon enough the image of the water slowly receding became clear as day to his vision. He closed his right eye, allowing full vision for his Sharingan, making sure he hadn't imagined what he had just seen, and sure enough the clear waters receded again, draining ever so slowly, and like a spreading plague, murk was taking its place. Both eyes opened wide before he turned to the Kyuubi, who grinned at his realization. "Yes, your leaders are fools." It gripped the bars tight. The greatest mistake they made was breaking the line of previous host. Naruto's mind was racing at his words. Thinking back, his mom had been the previous Jinchuriki, and before her, the wife of the first Hokage, Mito Uzumaki. All the previous hosts for the Kyuubi have been Uzumaki. "Wait, are you saying that I?" He trailed off, seeing its grin. "Haven't you felt the connection, Naruto?" Its face morphed into mock hurt. "I mean, it just used to be me and you together, for 10 long months." It finished, seeing the dawning horror on his face. "No matter." A long talon pointed to Konohamaru. "I'll be seeing you soon, real soon." The last thing he heard was its malevolent laughter as he was thrust out of the mindscape. Naruto snapped awake instantly, grabbing the hand was inches from his face. Twisting the appendage behind its owner's back, he leaped out of the bed he inhibited, sword drawn, hovering inches from the neck of his human shield. His Sharingan burned an angry red, narrowed to slits, and his killing intent saturated the air. Wide eyes stared back at him. Blinking, he stared confusedly at the green jackets and leaf headbands before he stared down at a red-faced and very angry Kurenai. Realizing he had nearly harmed a fellow leaf soldier, he smiled. "Hi there." Kurenai blinked dumbly before her face scowled. "Let me go, you idiot." Gently doing so, Naruto let her arm go, and removed his sword from her neck, smoothly sheathing it. Kurenai pushed herself off of him, and rolled the arm that he held, glaring at him with her exotic red eyes. Feeling honestly regretful, Naruto tugged on her hand. "Sorry, Kurenai-chan. I didn't mean to harm you." Hearing in the sincerity in his voice, her eyes softened bit before she gave his hand a warm squeeze. "It's fine." Naruto gave a small grin, letting go of her hand before he looked around at the large medical tent they were in. "What happened?" Standing on her toes, she reached up and brushed back his slick blonde locks that had become disarrayed. "You were moaning in your sleep and sweating. I came to try and wake you, and you know." She gestured with her hands, nodding when she made his hair suitable, settling back on her feet. Naruto slowly nodded, but before he could question further, the duo was surrounded by familiar green vest. "Geez, remind me never to try and wake you, Naruto." Asuma drawled lazily, puffing on his cigarette. He glanced to Kurenai. "You good, Kurenai-chan?" He was promptly ignored. "Come on. Don't tell me you're still pissed." He whined. Ignoring Asuma's trouble, Guy marched up Naruto, wrapping him in a bear hug. "Oh, my eternal rival. I rejoice now that you have awakened from your restful slumber. I was worried greatly when we found you unconscious." He cried, tears running down his eyes. Naruto just sighed, before he lightly patted the eccentric man on the back. There, Guy." The man stopped his tears but didn't release him. "Please put me down now." Guy grinned sheepishly but did as requested. Kurenai rolled her eyes at Guy's antics. Gaining his attention, she spoke. "When you performed your Rasen whatever," glaring at him for his correction of Bolt, she continued. "We rushed to the village to find you. When we did, you were unconscious in the street with Konohamaru burned and slumped over you. Sandwiched between the two of you was a badly corroded small body that was unrecognizable." Naruto glanced down at her words, and his eyes widened as they looked at his hands. Skin that was once charred black, burned through the bone, was perfectly unmarred. "My hands, when you found me, weren't they burned?" Kurenai shook her head slowly. "No, when we found you were perfectly unharmed, save for your headband. Only Konohamaru was burned, even then he was slowly healing." He ran a hand against his naked head, eyes wide. "Haven't you felt the connection, Naruto?" The words echoed through his head and his mind reeled till the point his heart drummed against his chest. What the fuck was going on? It was Kurenai's gentle voice that brought him back to reality, her eyes worried. She stared up at him. "What happened out there?" Feeling all eyes on him, he glanced around, seeing the conversation had gained the entire attention of the tent. "Inquisitive bums. When I felt the Kyuubi's chakra, I rushed to the source expecting to find Konohamaru. I did find him, but what?" She prodded gently, seeing his eyes dim. There was another container of the Kyuubi's chakra." Alarmed whispers grew, and moments later shouts filled the room. "What, another Jinchuriki? That's impossible. Oh shit, the higher-ups are going to lose their teeth. This could mean war." Panic filled the air after the last comment, and everyone began to shout and spout obscenities. "Can you all just shut the fuck up?" Everyone stopped, mouths dropped open as Kurenai stood tall and imposing, wreaking killing intent at anyone who dared meet her gaze. When all was quiet, she huffed. "Thank you," she muttered sweetly, smiling disarmingly. "Now, Naruto-kun, as you were saying." She gestured for him to continue. Naruto's eyes were open wide, his brow past his hairline but schooled his features at her request. "Alright." They were fighting and it was pretty much one-sided. Sora, the false Jinchuriki, was getting thrashed, and Konohamaru was about to beat him to death. I intervened in the nick of time to try and suppress his chakra, but was interrupted by Kazuma. "Who?" she questioned, not noticing the way Asuma's eyes widened. Furito Tsuyoshi was just a fake name. His real name was Kazuma. He was the leader of the One King protesters, and word got out of S.D, and he knew we were coming. He set a trap, wanting to use his son Sora. He licked his lips. The day of the Kyuubi attack, he had sealed the leftover chakra of the beast into his son. He wanted to use Sora as weapon against Konoha and try to destroy the village. Where is he? Asuma questioned, looking ready to murder. Naruto met his gaze. Dead. So then what happened? Guy questioned. Naruto ran a hand through his hair. Well, things went to shit and both of them sprouted 4 tails. I used my Rasen bolt in the village, managing to momentarily disable the duo. But Konohamaru managed to brush off the attack, and drain the Kyuubi's chakra from Sora and emaciating him, and then came after me. He shoved his hands into his pockets. And that's when you guys found me. Is that everything? Kurenai questioned, searching his gaze. When he didn't answer, she set a hand against his shoulder. Naruto. He sighed deeply, but didn't answer, choosing to gently remove her hand and make his way to the exit. That's everything important, he whispered, as people parted around him, giving him way to the exit. Everyone watched his back with gazes set into confusion. When Kurenai looked like she was going to go after him, Guy gently but firmly held her hand. He shook his head when her ruby eyes met his. Let him go, Kurenai-chan. When she was about to retort, he held up a hand. I know you have questions. We all have questions. But right now isn't the time. Asuma crossed his arms. He can't just leave us hanging like that. Nods of improvement accompanied his statement. We'll get our answers later. For now we must all rest, it's been a long night. He sighed. Kurenai mirrored Asuma's expression watching Naruto's green vest disappear into the Genin tent. What's wrong with him, Guy? Seeing his expression, her eyes sorrowed. He looked like he was in so much pain. Guy nodded stiffly. Indeed, inside the Genin tent, long rows of beds were set up for any Genin that had passed the test to sleep in. Naruto inwardly scoffed as he entered. As if their young minds could sleep right after killing innocents. The tent was dark, the rows of lights on the walls turned to a dimming glow. The occasional nurse walked around beds and spoke words of comfort to any child who needed it. For those who couldn't sleep, benches were set up at the end of the tent to sit on, and there he caught Team 7, huddled beside each other. Walking quietly, and nodding to the occasional nurse who smiled at him, he trudged forward to his team, inwardly breathing a sigh of relief when Konohamaru's brown eyes were the first to recognize him, and the Genin jumped out of his seat. Sensei! His voice was loud enough to wake up the entire tent, but at the moment Naruto didn't care. He opened his arms wide and caught the young boy as he sprinted at him. 2 more voices joined him, and Naruto was knocked to the ground as 2 small bodies collided with him. He glanced at them, his eyes taking every detail in hungrily, looking if any hair was misplaced on their bodies. When he saw they were unharmed and breathing, he felt the dread in his stomach disappear and an unfamiliar wetness in his eyes. He didn't cry for anything. But now at this moment, when tears formed in his eyes as he wrapped his arms around their little bodies, Naruto didn't care. Gently whispering words of comfort to Sakura's cries. Rubbing soothing circles into Sasuke's back and tucking Konohamaru's head securely under his neck, he felt that this long, long night had been worth it. After everything that had happened today, he felt that nothing else mattered, nothing in the world mattered. As long as he had Team 7. Konohamaru raised his head, skin thankfully back to its normal hue. We worried about you. Sasuke nodded in agreement, rubbing away the stubborn liquid in his eye. All the other Jonin Sensei came for the teams except you. My bad guys. I was a little tired, you see, and had to take a nap. They all laughed at his familiar excuse before Sakura gave him a teary smile. She pressed a kiss to his masked cheek and wrapped her arms around his neck. I don't care, Sensei, as long as you're here. The boys shared her sentiments, and Naruto wheezed a bit as 3 pairs of arms wrapped around his form. He didn't dare complain though, as his large hands encircled their small bodies, forming a barrier from the nosy eyes watching them. I'm proud of you guys. He whispered just for their ears. You can't imagine how relieved I am to have all 3 of you. They all bumped heads so Naruto could look at each pair of eyes. You guys are the best. For once not caring about vengeful thoughts, and just glad he had his team. Sasuke held up his pinky finger. Team 7 forever. Sakura giggled but mirrored his antics. Team 7 forever. Konohamaru grinned. Hell yeah, we're the best. Naruto chuckled before he mirrored his team and held out his pinky. They all intertwined their fingers and shook on it. Team 7, forever. Arriving back into Konoha and saying his goodbyes to other teams and Jonin, Naruto decided he would personally walk each and every single one of his Genin home. First stop was Sakura. Arriving at her parents' house, gently ringing the doorbell, they all waited for a few moments before a rush of feet was heard and two worried-looking parents opened the door. A man with the most ridiculous hairstyle Naruto had ever seen appeared. Kazashi Haruno shook his head of dull pink hair in the form a cherry blossom frantically at the sight of his daughter. Sakura-chan. His angular mustache was wet with tears as he picked the girl up into his large hands and began cry his eyes out. His words were unintelligible but he seemed he was offering his thanks as he shook Naruto's hands, and brought an embarrassed-looking Sakura inside who managed wave back at them. A blonde-haired woman, seeing herself the more sensible parent, thanked him profusely and shook his hand. Bowing to him and his team, she bid his team a good night and gently closed the door. Her voice soon accompanied her husband's in crying. Meeting the boys' stares he shrugged and they continued onwards. Next up was Konohamaru, arriving at the large Sarutobi compound. The guards nodded at the team, and gestured for Konohamaru, but the young boy paused and tentatively turned to his sensei. Sensei about the queue, he trailed off seeing Naruto's wave. Don't worry about Ko, we'll talk tomorrow. As for now, go home and rest. The young boy nodded before he was led away. Walking with Sasuke in silence they continued onwards to the Uchiha compound. Naruto caught Sasuke looking at him out of the corner of his eye but didn't comment on it. After a moment of walking in silence Naruto turned to him. Something wrong, Sasuke? The boy looked away at being caught staring before he stopped abruptly. Mirroring him, Naruto glanced at him in confusion. What is it? Sasuke looked at him but couldn't meet his gaze. His shoulders were tense and he looked like he's having an internal struggle. Can you? He cleared his throat. You know, my mom cooks really well. And she always wanted to meet you, he trailed off, his cheeks coloring a bit. I mean I know you have a home and all, but you can stay with us for tonight. Naruto stared at him quietly, before a gentle smile formed under his mask. I would love to, he stated honestly, but I have to report to the Hokage, plus a worried blonde is waiting for me at home. Sasuke looked downtrodden, but nodded nevertheless, choosing to walk on ahead. Naruto chuckled following him before he threw an arm around the boy's shoulders, messing up his hair. Sasuke slapped his hands away, his face red with embarrassment, but he couldn't hide the genuine smile on his face. Sasuke! The shout caused both of them to stop and they glanced to the direction of the main Uchiha house to see a form on the steps. Mikoto Uchiha, clad in her traditional black dress, stood there with tears streaming down her eyes at the sight of her boy. Overcome with emotion and fighting off her own fears, she hopped down the steps before she ran towards the two. Sasuke! Sasuke's brows were furrowed, his eyes wide in disbelief at the sight. Mom? He activated his Sharingan to make sure he wasn't seeing a genjutsu. Mom! He took off, not a moment later meeting his mother halfway and crashing into her with a hug. Naruto walked closer, but stood at a respectable distance, allowing mother and son to have their moment. Mikoto's eyes were streaming with tears, and her hand constantly ran through her son's ebony locks. Naruto had to suppress a laugh as Sasuke's face was showered with kisses and the young boy's embarrassment rang out. Mom! Please, not in front of my sensei. She stopped but not before giving him a once-over. Satisfied he was unharmed she gave him a tight hug before finally glancing at Naruto before her eyes widened. Naruto immediately bowed in greeting. Lady Uchiha. He addressed respectively, and Naruto. Hearing recognition her voice caused him to lift his head. A hand was over her mouth and her eyes ran over his form in astonishment. Walking a bit closer, he stopped in front of the two. Hi. He was astonished that this woman still remembered him after only meeting him a couple times since he was toddler. He was unprepared for the hug that came his way. Naruto-kun. She held him at arm's length. Look at you, so tall. Last time we met you were such a small thing. Feeling embarrassed and equally uncomfortable he just stayed quiet. Her hands searched his form before they zeroed in on his mask. Meeting his eyes, she whispered softly. May I? This was his mom's best friend and his best friend's mom. No. She pouted a bit, let go of his mask and gently held her hands in his. Thank you, for taking care of my boy. The whole village was constantly talking about some dangerous test and I was worried sick. He shook his head. You don't need to thank me. He already decided long ago he would protect his team with his life. Well, even if you don't accept it, I'll thank you anyway. She met his eyes, and she smiled a bit. Kami, Minato and Kushina would have been so proud. The comment caused his heart to swell a bit and he pushed down the suddenly rising emotion. Please, will you join us for dinner tonight? We would love your company. He could only shake his head. Sorry, but I have a report to the Hokage with my fellow Jounin. Plus I have to return home after. She mirrored her son, looking downtrodden but nodded nonetheless. His second surprise that night came in the form of her stepping on her toes to press a soft kiss against his cheek. Lowering herself she smiled up at him, stroking his cheek before she walked away, leading a blushing Sasuke inside. He stood there awkwardly before shook his head and began to walk away. Don't think about your student's mom that way. Don't think about your student's mom that way. Don't. He repeated the mantra all the way to the Hokage tower. Naruto was all business as he and the rest of the Jonin Sensei stood before the third and village elders in the conference room. Umbu were quietly organizing papers and setting files before him. When finished they bowed and disappeared as quickly as they had come. The door locked and seals briefly glowed, locking them all inside the room. Thankfully, no military police were present. Just the Jonin Sensei. The Hokage shifted in his seat. All eyes focused on him as he opened up a file and scanned its contents. I have here before me a file on the 8 Jonin Sensei teams that I sent to Black River Village to conduct the Konoha silent dispatch test. His eyes focused on the Jounin. Well then, let's see whose Genin will remain soldiers. When you hear your team, please indicate pass or fail. Team 7, pass. Team 8, pass. The Hokage locked eyes with Kurenai. He smirked before he returned his attention back to the sheet. Team 10, pass. Team 12, pass. Aoba smiled. Maybe his team could finally pass the Chunin exam. Team Guy, pass. Team 13, fail. Team 14, fail. Team 15, a helpless sigh was heard. Fail. The Hokage made an X on the last box, setting down his pen. Leaning back in his chair he regarded the group. Not bad. 5 out 8 passed. I honestly expected worse. No one replied to that. They all sat in silence, staring with blank expressions. Danzu scoffed. That's an improvement. But I can't say it's not hard to improve on garbage. Her fiery temper roused. Kurenai gritted her teeth. Listen here, you pile of shit. Naruto slapped a hand over her mouth, stopping her. She would probably say something she would later regret. She struggled against him a bit, and it took hushed whispers into her ear for her to eventually calm down. She still didn't let up her glare though. Danzu returned it with indifference. Hiruzen puffed on his pipe. Kurenai. Hearing her name she stood at attention. Hokage-sama, you and I will have a private chat later. I have interesting news about the way you handled your Hyuga during the test. It was not a request. She nodded stiffly, bowing slightly. As for the rest of you, dismissed. The seals glowed against the walls again, and the doors unlocked. As one, the Jounin bowed before they began to shuffle for the exit. A grizzled eye raised as Naruto remained where he was. When he didn't move, the third stared at him. Problem, Naruto? Naruto nodded slowly. His Sharingan glowed a burning red as he tilted his head at the third. You could say. Hiruzen stared wordlessly at him. Hamura, who had been quiet the whole time, sneered at Naruto before turning to his old teammate. Hiruzen, please just arrest this boy. His insubordination knows no limits. His request was denied as the third simply held up a hand. Leave us. When Hamura sputtered, he flared his chakra a bit. Both of you, leave us. Now. The two elders did as requested and despite their age, gracefully raised themselves out of their seats and silently walked past Naruto, heading to the door. Danzu did wordlessly, but Hamura felt the need to fire a few words. I'll have you know, boy, that I. When dual-colored eyes landed on his face, his skin paled a bit before he recoiled. Trying to save face, he scoffed before he hastily made for the exit, slamming the door shut behind him. Silently, Naruto returned his stare back to the Hokage, who hadn't once broken his gaze. Old man, what? That jutsu you used in the village, what was it called? The third cut him off. Naruto glared, staying silent for a few moments. Rasen Bolt. Rasen Bolt? The third echoed. He scratched his goatee. A Rasengan embedded with lightning chakra, genius. Not even Minato in all his prowess could hope to accomplish such a feat. You should see Rasen Shuriken. Naruto inwardly mused. But speaking of his jutsu wasn't the point. Listen, you know that Rasen Bolt killed a lot of villagers. He cut him off again. Unfortunate souls, close enough, were reduced to nothing but atoms, as the reports say. 2 Kyuubi Jinchuriki fighting called for desperate measures. Naruto bit out, fed up with the interruptions. The third leaned back into his chair. Indeed. His face grimaced. That Sora boy, yes. I'm glad he's dead, or I would have been forced to mobilize our military. 17,000 shinobi marching through fire country wouldn't be a pretty sight. And that one who did the sealing, the boy's father, Kazuma, is dead, correct? Naruto nodded. Good, so tell me, Naruto, what I did to suffer this bout of ire from you, please? He observed the young man critically. I know. Konohamaru can't contain the Kyuubi, can he? It was Hiruzen's turn to be interrupted, and the pipe in his mouth almost fell out in shock. His eyes narrowed on Naruto's form and his chakra rapidly began to spike. Who informed you of that? The god of shinobi began to rise from his seat and his hands slammed down on his wooden desk, indenting the wood. Answer me, boy. Naruto only in return offered a direct challenge and spiked his own chakra levels, easily matching the third's. Answer my question first, old man. The two clashing chakra signatures caused the room to crack and the floorboards to creak. All bodies in the Hokage Tower felt the powerful chakra and nearly fell to their knees at the overbearing pressure. The battles of wills continued till Umbu burst in the room, all aiming swords at Naruto's unprotected back. When the two occupants didn't even acknowledge their presence, the captain of the squad turned towards the Hokage. My lord? He kept his eyes on Naruto, his question asking for guidance on how to act. Hiruzen kept his gaze on Naruto before his chakra levels calmed and he slowly sat back in his seat. Get out. The Umbu hesitated but nevertheless obeyed, as they sheathed their swords and bowed before exiting. The third picked up his pipe and filled it with a generous amount of tobacco and lit with a flicker of chakra. Puffing slowly, he calmed his nerves before regarding Naruto silently. He let out a few puffs of smoke before he spoke. I'll answer your question, Naruto. But please, tell me first exactly how you acquired such information. Hearing his level tone, Naruto finally lowered his chakra levels also before losing his tense form. He shoved his hands into his pockets. I spoke with the Kyuubi. The third's eyes went wide. My Sharingan allowed me to enter Konohamaru's subconscious, and there I spoke with the beast. It told me it would soon get out. The third stared wide-eyed for a moment before he sighed and took his hat off his head. He ran a hand through his dulling hair and sighed painfully, looking more like an old man than the powerful leader he had just been. You know, Naruto, at times like this I think, fuck, why did I ever accept this job? Why didn't I let some other dumb bastard get stuck in this Kami-forsaken shithole, and live out the rest of my life as a soldier who would eventually die on the battlefield? Naruto stared unblinking. You have only yourself to blame for accepting it. The third thought about it for a second, before he conceded. Indeed. When Tobemaru Sensei bestowed the title onto me, I was too hasty. Heat scad. I should have just given it to Danzu. He sighed heavily, slumping in his chair, staring up at the ceiling with a look of remorse. Naruto waited patiently, but when he didn't speak he became annoyed. Old man. He bit out tiredly. Hiruzen finally tilted his head to look at him and Naruto had to pause at the intense emotions that swelled into his grizzled eyes. You know, he was only 2 when it happened. When the attack started, Naruto listened intently. Minato needed a Jinchuriki. He was planning for your sister to be the one, but Kushina, Kami rest her soul, had a miscarriage. The Kyuubi would have destroyed Konoha. I couldn't allow that. So I gave him the next best choice. He trailed off as his gaze reflected the distant memory. Konohamaru. Naruto whispered. Hiruzen nodded. Yes, my own grandson. The boy who had just watched his mother get crushed under their collapsing house. I gave him to Minato, and before I knew it I was holding Konoha's newest Jinchuriki. Naruto shook his head. But it all doesn't make any sense. What happened that night? How did the seal break? Dad's work, his genius, was perfect. How could it break when he was with her? If it wasn't for the Sharingan, Naruto would have missed his flinch. But he saw it. I don't know, Hiruzen stated with a whisper. Before he could blink, Naruto was in front of him. Crash! The wooden table shattered under the power of his fist as he glared with all his intent at the third. "You're lying, old man. Tell me." He wanted the answers. The answers to the many questions that had plagued him since that night. For too long he had been denied the truth, and tonight he wasn't going nowhere till he got answers. "Become Hokage and I'll tell you everything." The whisper caused his chakra to spike out rapidly, and lightning began to crackle around Naruto's form. His teeth grounded together under his mask, and the third was grabbed by the scruff of his robe and yanked to Naruto's level. Hiruzen watched unflinchingly as the Jonin in front of him breathed harshly, his right eye glowing a frosty blue and the other burning with an intense red. "If you kill me, you won't get your answers. Plus, an army would be after your head. Not even you can fight off 17,000 soldiers." Naruto tightened his grip till the point he knew it hurt before he loosened his grip and let the robe slip from his grasp. The third dropped back into his seat. Unperturbed, the Hokage smoothed out the wrinkles in his robes and lightly brushed off any accumulated dust. Naruto began to pace the room like an angry tiger, the third watching his movements with a critical eye. "Didn't you want to find about Konohamaru?" The question caused Naruto to stop, but his glare was all that he needed to get the third to lift the carefully guarded secrets of his grandson. "I wanted for him to have a childhood. A long one. By the age of 7 we began his training to become Konoha's perfect weapon. Let me guess, Root." At his nod, Naruto threw his hands up in exasperation. It was always motherfucking Root. He lived a double life, attending the academy and training in secret. I ordered him to take up a fake persona to not bring attention to himself. He sighed. The day I announced his status, the civilian and many of the ninja population rejected him. They only saw a beast. And thinking of everything I've done, the least I could do was make him be honored as a hero. So I made a law. Is that why everyone is so sketchy when they talk to him? Again, Hiruzen nodded. Wow, isn't that supposed to be an S-class secret? He shook his head. Worst fucking secret I ever heard of. The third ignored the jab. But when he turned 9, time came for his more serious training. His Jinchuriki training. But he had failed spectacular and his body would suffer a great deal of pain. Our medics and scientists were baffled by this. We thought something was wrong with the seal. But no, the seal was perfect. His own body couldn't handle the strain. He sighed miserably. So? Naruto prodded, already knowing what was about to be said. He willed his heart to calm. So we stopped his training. And sent him back to the academy full-time under 24-hour surveillance. He was to reveal nothing to no one. All we could do is prepare for the inevitable, and ready another candidate. Naruto thought he heard wrong. What? Hiruzen sighed. You must understand, Naruto. He pleaded. Billions of dollars went into his training, and when he failed it all, the money couldn't just go to waste. I was being pressured for a weapon. Konoha needed a weapon. So I offered the fucking next best thing. What did you do? Naruto stuttered. I. His eyes were bright with tears. Kushina's baby was miscarriage, but the child was still alive but dying. We cultivated her stem cells from the umbilical cord and stored them. She died after, but it secured Konoha's future. All of our futures. Now, we can gene pool perfect candidates. Restart the Uzumaki line. With surrogates we can have your clan back in a less than 5 years. Naruto couldn't breathe. He was pretty sure that thump against his chest was his heart skipping a beat. The old man was joking. He must be joking. But seeing his expression and realizing the bullshit the man was sprouting was true, unrestrained rage filled his form. Please understand, Naruto. Crack! The third rocketed from his seat from the force of the blow and crashed against the stone wall behind him. Umbu burst into the room, weapons drawn, and immediately went on the attack. In a flash Naruto had his sword drawn, the blade humming through the air as it cut down his foes. The slices weren't fatal, only disabling as he aimed for legs and wrist, dropping the elite team like they were rookie Genin. It didn't last 5 seconds. The Umbu team lay on ground withering in pain, bloody and beaten. And like a sentry the yellow Fang stood over them, looking like death incarnate as he flicked his wrist, sending blood off his sword. The captain fingered his piece. Alert! Alert! Code Black. I repeat, Code AK. A kick to the head knocked him out, but the message was already sent. A legend among Umbu, Naruto understood the message loud and clear. Hokage under attack. Send everyone. And before he could blink he found himself surrounded on all sides by Umbu. Swords poised and ready to cut him down if he so much as moved. The elite force stood rigid. Although vastly outnumbering, they instantly recognized who they were up against, and some shuffled tensely. Not even intimidated in the least, Naruto flared his chakra, holding his blade at the ready. Lighting sparked around his form, and his powerful chakra spiked out rapidly. Hoisting his sword, he gripped the handle, running his chakra through the blade. The legendary sword began to hum, glowing with chakra as he prepared to unleash a "Stand down." The voice came from the third, hoisting himself on his chair, nursing his broken jaw. With a crack he snapped it back into place. When he didn't see any of the Black Ops members heed his command, he barked again. "Stand down," and Umbu close to him hesitated. "But my lord, I said stand down. Now." His tone broke no room for argument, and one by one the Black Ops members lowered their weapons. Naruto slowly lowered his chakra levels, causing those close enough to him to shuffle backwards, their forms finally being able to breathe as he cut off the flow of chakra to his sword, wordlessly sheathing the blade. Not even glancing at the Hokage, he began to head for the exit. "Forgive me, Naruto. But I did what I must to secure Konoha's future." He was ignored as Naruto continued without pause. A body blocked his exit, and Naruto's reflection stared back at him in an all-black mask. The Umbu commander had suddenly appeared, no movement or smoke to indicate the sudden appearance. Coated in all-black armor, with a maroon-red cloak, the commander made for an intimidating presence. A staring contest ensued before the commander silently moved to the side, allowing him to pass. Naruto moved past the dangerous leader only to feel a glove hand on his shoulder. "I'll be watching you." The disembodied voice gave nothing away as to which gender led the entire Black Ops force, but the voice-altering software did make a spine-crawling sound. Naruto was unimpressed, patiently waiting for the commander to remove the appendage, and wordlessly walked out when the hand left his shoulder. "Fuck this village." The population in Konoha parted like the Red Sea, as Naruto walked forward, radiating so much killing intent that villagers who got too close passed out or lost their dinners. He continued forward, not pausing to stare at the many eyes that tracked his form. Walking through the more wealthy sectors of the village, he arrived before a sky-high condo. Entering through the glass doors, he briefly glanced at the security guards usually on night patrol as they tried to merge against the walls as his murderous gaze swept over them. Entering the elevator and pushing the button that led to the penthouse, he waited in silent anger for the elevator ride to finish. "Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you." His already foul mood skyrocketed as the elevator song played, and he literally saw red. His fist lashed out and he dented the thick iron beside him. Thankfully the doors finally opened and he walked forward to a familiar door. Putting his hand against the door, running his chakra through it, a seal glowed before the door unlocked itself. Entering to his home, he saw that all the lights were off and the house was covered in darkness. The only source of light was the large television playing some ridiculous movie about cats fighting dogs. The door closed itself behind him and he took off his sandals, walking silently forward. Stopping before a large leather L-shaped couch, his anger was momentarily forgotten as he watched his blonde beauty snore lightly in her sleep. Surrounding her was his entire ninja hound team. He glanced closer and could see Pakin was the lucky one that cuddled, and was tucked into her arms. Finding the remote, he turned off the screen, before he walked to the master bedroom. Opening the door, a large king-size bed greeted him. Imported from Moon Country, the coated ebony bed was a rarity. Its handles and headboards were painted ebony, carved to perfection in patterns symbolizing the Uzumaki clan insignia. The stylish design finished with a rosy red outline. Matching its outline, the sheets stood out beautifully amongst the dark color, almost reminding him of Konohamaru's subconscious. He moved across the snowy white carpeted floors and sat down on his bed with a sigh. He idly glanced around his room, silently thanking the Prince of Moon Country, Michiru, for his wealth. Oh yes, he was loaded. On either side of the bed was small ebony dressers finished with sapphire handles. On the other side of the room was a large dresser, the same colors as its smaller counterparts. Like the others, its sapphire handles twinkled, but was flawlessly finished with a large square mirror. He didn't even want to start with the master bathroom. All this wealth for so little work. He had protected the man's son on one of his missions years ago and was paid handsomely. Added bonus, he slept with his hot ex-wife. But that was in the past, and he had put those types of mannerism long behind him. But still he could be the richest man in the world, and he would still be unhappy. All this, material stuff, it didn't matter to him at all. Sure, it was nice to have luxury and enjoy it. But he had come from humble beginnings and valued the bonds of his family more than any coin. What's the point of having it, if he didn't have anyone to share it with? It was gentle fingers running through his hair that wordlessly answered his question. A lace blue chemise filled his vision. Naruto couldn't help but stare as he realized the silky material was see-through and black garments were visible underneath. He stared up into twinkling blue eyes, and her beautiful face lost its grin seeing his expression. She gently tugged on his blonde locks as her eyes filled with worry. What's wrong? Hearing her voice just eased the tension out of his stiff limbs and Naruto all but slumped against her, pressing his forehead up against her stomach. This night had been too much even for him. The conversation with the Hokage just threw him over the delicate edge that he had been balancing on. Going rogue had honestly crossed his mind. Murdering the Hokage right then and there, and slicing down any Umbu unlucky enough to get in his way. It would take about 60 seconds for the village to declare lockdown. More than enough time for him to slip in his apartment, retrieve all his supplies, say his goodbyes and be well into the deep forest of Fire Country before those massive gates closed. But he banished the thoughts the moment he thought of her. How could he ever leave her? The question echoed in his mind as her gentle hands unzipped his bulky vest. It cluttered to the floor, his sword attached to it, chattering on the ground. He wordlessly lifted his arms above his head allowing her to pull his black long-sleeve shirt off. Left in his skin-tight sleeveless face mask shirt, the necklace that he won long ago from the Slug Queen herself became exposed, twinkling lightly. She sat herself across his lap, gliding her hands through his in that perfectly soothing manner. "Talk to me, Naruto-kun. What's wrong?" He didn't respond for a few moments, choosing to just stare at her. His previous question still radiated in his mind and he came to an epiphany as he pulled down his face mask and kissed her. And like the angel she was, she wordlessly accepted his show of affection laying down on the bed, his form ravishing hers with kisses. Clothes became discarded and soon the familiar sensation of two bodies joining in unison blissfully led them through the night. And as her moans filled the night, her hand gently running through his hair, he inwardly answered his own peril. He couldn't leave her. Not even if he tried. Okay. Make the Umbu commander. Before he could blink he found himself surrounded on all sides by Umbu. Swords poised and ready to cut him down if he so much as moved. The elite force stood rigid. Although vastly outnumbering him they instantly recognized who they were up against and some shuffled tensely. Is that Naruto-senpai? The yellow Fang is our enemy. Well, it's been nice knowing y'all. Quiet. The Umbu commander stood tall and imposing as she appeared in the room. Clad in all black with a red coat, the commander made an intimidating sight in appearance. There was no flicker of movement, no sound or smoke. The leader of the Black Ops group had just appeared, Naruto Namikaze. Rank Jonin, Ninja Registration, 012607. You are hereby under arrest for the assault of the third Hokage of Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi and Umbu Black Ops soldiers. The voice-altering software was indistinguishable in nature making he/she's voice androgynous. Arrest him. When no one made a move the commander's side, before she walked forwards. When she stood before Naruto, she gestured to his sword. Please hand me your weapon and utility pouch. When Naruto made no move to do so, the commander shook her head. Listen, you have 3 options. 1. We disarm you and you come quietly. 2. You try and I fight, we overpower you. We win, you lose. 3. We all rush you and hope to see if you're as fast as they say you are. Hands on her hips she waited. Well? Naruto eyes over the commander's form. There was nothing to indicate male or female, and the commander was quite tall as they almost stood face to face. Are you a man or a woman? The commander tilted her head. My gender doesn't concern you. What should be of concern is that you have less than 10 seconds to choose before I choose for you. And I'm going for 3. He nodded slowly and his hand flashed out. The commander squeaked, feeling where his hand had landed, and every mouth in the room dropped open. Naruto slowly retracted his hand, looking content. You're a woman. I knew it. Whispers were heard and masked faces turned to one another. No fucking way he's a chick. Motherfucker, I told you. You owe me 500. Ah, shit, fuck. Who knew she was a he? Oh man. Wait till the boys on the border hear about this one. That's a relief. I thought I was gay. Masked faces turned to the lone individual. What? Quiet. The commander stood shaking with fury and Naruto could picture the face under the helmet burning with embarrassment. Jerk. Naruto couldn't react in time to the knee to the groin and fell down in heap withering in pain. Option 3. She shouted, dog-piling him. Everyone else joined and the entire contingent of Umbu dog-piled him. Chapter 8, The Root of All Fears. The steady taps echoed through the dark hallway, penetrating the piercing silence as its owner limped onwards, never breaking stride. His robes fluttered softly with each movement, the white and dark colors blending perfectly with the darkness around him. Single eye closed, face void of any emotion, Danzo limped through the dark hallways of his underground root base. Beside him a young boy of an unhealthy pale complexion followed his master's shadow, face as blank as his pale skin. Garbed in traditional root attire, the young boy wordlessly moved forward as Danzo stopped before a large iron door, and opened it, allowing his master passage. He bowed as Danzo passed him, silently closing the door and taking sentry outside. Entering through without a word, Danzo continued forward, arriving before a pair of whispering soldiers who quickly kneeled, bowing before his presence. His lone eye glanced over their forms critically, gaze locked on the heads of each masked face. They waited patiently, postures still as statues, as Danzo conducted his silent observation. Remove your mask. They instantly obeyed, removing their white masks, lifting their heads in sync to reveal their features to his lone eye. Fu report. The male among the duo tilted his head in acknowledgement before beginning to transpire the events that he had witnessed not long ago. It as you suspected, my lord. He knows. Danzo narrowed his eye, his mouth turning downwards into a frown. How did Hiruzen react? Fu kept his features blank. His voice emotionless. He let him go. Danzo's frown deepened. Hiruzen let the boy go? His mind raced to think of the reasons why Hiruzen just didn't try and kill him right there. Surely in his old age he couldn't match him, but with the aid of the Umbu plus the presence of the commander he could have easily overwhelmed him. What game was he playing? To let such knowledge be freely exposed, and by him no less, it would be too dangerous to let him run free. Hatred would shape his heart and he would seek vengeance. Justice. Revenge. Danzo was all too aware of those dangerous roads. What else did he find out? He questioned. He knows of the Kyuubi's vessel's weakness. Fu blinked. He entered the boy's subconscious and spoke with the beast. Danzo's lone eye went wide at that news. So, he was finally learning that the Sharingan could do more than just copy jutsu. Danzo shook his head. Hiruzen was surely a fool for letting him go, but still to be able to penetrate Konohamaru's subconscious mind and speak with the beast was an extraordinary feat. He didn't have a speck of Uchiha blood in him and was able to forcefully suppress the beast's chakra with his Sharingan alone. Naruto was a dangerous one. Still, for Hiruzen to let him be the one to teach the Jinchuriki and the last Uchiha. What on earth had that monkey been thinking? And to think that he would have access to the Naka shrine by proxy of his student. He fought the urge to sigh, thinking of the consequences if he ever learned the secrets of the Sharingan. If he ever unlocked the Manikyo, then Danzo would arm his entire root force and attack, consequences be damned. He was already ridiculously powerful and that eye would just make him unstoppable. The two root soldiers remained motionless as their master cursed. Danzo gripped the wood of his cane tight enough to almost snap it in half. If only Konohamaru didn't turn out as failure, he could have had the Hokage seat by now. Naruto's strength would be no match against Konoha under his command. He was the one to instigate young Konohamaru's training when he reached of age. He wanted to start earlier on, but no, Hiruzen wanted his grandson to have a childhood. Paw! Even when his Jinchuriki training failed, Danzo could have shaped the boy into a raw weapon. His hidden potential and Sarutobi talent would have made him a force of nature. For however long his body would last, that is. But still, it was a wasted opportunity. He could have been salvaged and sent on missions too dangerous for the most elite of shinobi. But Hiruzen's weak ideology proved too strong, his heart too soft to make the hard decisions. Devastated by the failure and blaming himself for subjecting his godson through years of torture, Hiruzen thought it had all been for nothing. The god of shinobi's one weakness was his own godson. Pitiful. Soon enough, Danzo's blank check was cut and his hidden ace was stripped from his clutches and put back into the academy where his skills and mind were left to rust. Forced to live out the remainder of his days till his body broke down. Oh, what could have been? If he had Konohamaru for a little longer, he could have placed a special seal on the boy, binding him to his every whim. And with the first Hokage's cells, Shirsue's right eye, and a Jinchuuriki under his command, he would have started a coup d'état and overthrown Hiruzen. He knew for certain that his old teammate would never harm his own grandson. Of course, the resulting chaos would have thrown the Konoha into a civil war. Many lives would be lost and the village would ultimately be weakened. All necessary sacrifices for the greater good. He would rise up as new leader for the village. Rule with a heart of stone and will of fire, and lead Konoha to glory. It would be the dawn of the new age. The age of the leaf. Namikaze would have been dealt with swiftly, but alas, those were mere dreams and the harsh reality eventually set in. Konoha had lost its weapon. This time, Danzo did sigh, shaking his head in regret, although he would never admit out loud that old monkey was a crafty one. To have harnessed those cells. Not even he had ever thought of that. What was even more interesting was that he knew Hiruzen's old student was the one to help him do it. Not literally, of course. Orochimaru would rather die than help any Konoha shinobi, much less his old teacher. No, Hiruzen had been crafty like the monkey he was. Salvaging the lab his old student had in Konoha, the one that should have been destroyed, he had used Orochimaru's notes on cloning and extensive knowledge on human biology to salvage what he could of the supposed dying offspring and managed to save healthy, living, Uzumaki cells and store them. But to do all that right after Minato had finished his battle with the Kyuubi, it had taken some spine. He smirked thinking of the day when he had caught him in the sealing room. Never in all his years had he known his old teammate, would he ever think he would do that? So overcome with shock, he had revealed Shirsue's Sharingan just to make sure what he was seeing was true. At times Hiruzen was an enigma to him. Seemingly gentle and grandfatherly one moment, then brutal and cold the next. What he witnessed that night, doomed to remember it till his deathbed, he would never underestimate his rival ever again. Hiruzen couldn't hide his sins forever. But then again, neither could he. He already has Naruto's wrath. But to lie directly into his face was a gamble. A very deadly gamble. He hoped Hiruzen was keeping his cards close to his chest. For if Naruto ever found out the truth, then he would come after the both of them. He would kill, no, not just kill, massacre every single one that knew what really happened that night. Even if it were both him and Hiruzen fighting, the results would be no different. That Danzo could regrettably admit, hence why he kept his root agents close and ever-present eyes monitoring the Fourth's legacy. Even years later, human cloning was still beyond Hiruzen's seemingly endless knowledge, and Orochimaru hadn't left enough notes on it to be effective. The first few ones that were grown in a year quickly died shortly after. Their bodies tearing themselves apart, too weak to do anything other than breathe, much less contain the Kyuubi. He had to resort to surrogates to get the most effective use of the Uzumaki cells. But out of all the females' population in Konoha, only a few could match the strict gene pool candidate. Those Uzumakis, they were tough ones. Even their cells boasted superior attributes. No wonder their men never flocked to women of different clans. Their women were strong, very strong indeed. So Danzo had to be adaptable. Why should Hiruzen be the only one to have his own Uzumaki private army? If he wanted those genes, he had to take a different approach. Turning his attention to the only female member of the duo, he let his mouth momentarily curve upwards into a small smirk, before it vanished, seeming to never have formed in the first place. Staring into her eyes, he was all business as he gave her his full attention. Has any progress been made? She bowed her head, closing her eyes before addressing him. No, Danzo-sama. A graying eyebrow raised. Elaborate. He uses a contraception seal whenever we're intimate. Danzo-sked. The boy was worthy of his seal master title. But he needed results. And he needed them now. He had sent her in for a few months already and still no results. Failure was something he didn't stand for. I want results. His single eye bore down on her. Failure is not an option. She bowed. Forgive me, Danzo-sama, but if I may, I wish to speak freely with your permission. He frowned. Where was this coming from? After tense moments of silence, he nodded stiffly. It takes time, my lord. A large step such as this will take a substantive amount of consideration. And despite everything, he's very untrusting. I beg you to allow me more time, Danzo-sama. She lowered her head, her blonde locks spilling downwards. Danzo stared at his root seductress critically, weighing her words carefully. His brow creased in thought. After agonizing moments of silence, he thumped his cane on the ground in resolution, the sound piercing the unbearable silence. "Make sure by the next time we meet, you're pregnant." His words were cold as steel as he glanced at both brother and sister. "Or the next pair of soldiers to fight to the death will be you too." They bowed deeply, their heads touching the floor, as Danzu turned on his heel and slowly limped away. Without pause, the door opened for him and he silently glanced at his young protégé as the boy closed the large door behind him. Wordlessly walking forward, his cane tapped the steel floors harshly. "Come, Sai." His order roused the young man and he silently followed his master. "I must start your training. I fear you might be my final contingency plan if everything fails." Despite being at such a young age, the boy was a master assassin. His skills were highly effective, having never failed to kill a target. "Yes, Danzu-sama." Sai's whisper was quiet. Danzu didn't pay any attention to it, used to the boy's emotionless attributes. He had personally been the one to drill them into his young mind. If he listened closing enough, he would have the underlying uncertainty in the tone. Blissfully unaware behind his back, Sai glanced at his hand, finding the appendage shaking. "What is this?" Flipping a page in his book, Naruto walked through Konoha's busy streets, curious eyes tracing his form in astonishment, as he dodged traffic in his way with his vision completely obscured by the book's orange covers. One hand tucked into his pocket, the other gently holding his book, Naruto slowly walked onwards, making his way to the Sarutobi compound. He did promise Konohamaru that he and the young Genin would talk. He could guess the boy felt guilty over losing control and almost killing him during their dangerous encounter in Black River. After that, they would head to the training grounds for a team meeting. Under the cover of his book, his face was set in a fierce scowl as his thoughts drifted over the previous night. He was pissed. But for now, he put a lid on his temper. He had Genin to focus on and couldn't allow himself to be plagued by vengeful thoughts. He didn't even get any sleep the previous night. How could he? Finding out the man you had grown to respect was handing around the cells of your dead sibling like candy. Never in his life had he felt such a raw need to kill. His mind had wondered about everything. What would happen? He could settle this legally, bringing his case to the Land of Fire Supreme Court and claim a violation of human rights, with a direct inhumane treatment to the long history between what was once Konoha's greatest ally, the Uzumaki clan. His mother's clan. Riha had even suggested he had a strong case. Plus he was also held in high favor with the Fire Daimyo and held considerable influence both in and out of Konoha. Underneath his headband his Sharingan burned. He didn't want to settle things legally. He was a warrior. An expert in the application of violence. Trained in the art of combat and warfare. The army slayer wanted to burst out. The yellow fang that had solidified him as S-rank monster of the battlefield. Law was for the politics and nobles. Fuck all of that civilized bullshit. He wanted to kill. Level this Kamifusakan village to the ground. Find those abominations and vaporize them with the roar of thunder. Slaughter the third and the higher-ups till there were nothing but flesh and bone, and then he would cut open their dead corpses and see if their cells could be salvaged. He blinked, realizing he had been leaking killing intent. He relaxed his stiff posture and he felt his rapidly beating heart rate slow down. With a sigh he expelled those thoughts from his mind. Rationality had to eventually set in, and the deep consequences of taking such acts. Even if he did manage to kill the third, Konoha wouldn't just give him a slap on the wrist and say all is forgiven. Fuck no. He would be declared a missing nin faster than the Raikage body flicker and have every village on the continent after his head. Could he even leave his friends behind? His loved ones? Asuma, one of his closest friends, was the third's last living son. Even though the man disliked his father, he wouldn't take his death lightly. And his team, could he just leave them after everything they've been through? He slouched thinking of it all. It was Riha's logic that had reverberated through his mind that night. The soft-spoken whispers had coaxed his boiling anger and had eventually stopped him from starting what would be an eventual civil war. Naruto allowed a small smile to form underneath his mask. She was his little ball of sunshine. She was almost like a beacon of hope, giving light to this dark time he was going through. He told he everything that had transpired that night. She listened to every word, paying rapt attention to everything, eyes even comically going wide when he had told her about slicing through the umbu like butter with his sword. He even lightly bragged he had sent the Hokage flying with a mean right hook, which she then reacted in the form of throttling him. "You fucking idiot. You hit the Hokage. She shouted as she squeezed life from his throat, "You piece of shit bakachinko aho hakuchi kuno." If it weren't for the small hands squeezing his windpipe and his face turning blue from suffocation, he would have been laughing till his face turned red as his tender-mouthed sweetheart called him every word in the book. Damn, was she hot whenever she got upset. He absently traced the spot on his neck where her fingers had been, lightly chuckling to himself. She was hot when she became angry, but was also terribly strong. It almost reminded him of the days when his mother got really upset. He shuddered at the thought. Not even his father wanted to be around that. He stiffened momentarily, his smile instantly left his face and he immediately put his book away, sliding into his utility pouch. The crowds around Konoha kept going about their day. The occasional shinobi would be seen carrying out his or her business, with the bright afternoon sun providing humid weather. Nothing was out of the ordinary. If there was one thing Naruto trusted absolutely throughout his career, it would be his senses. From his acute hearing, or his sensitive nose, Naruto wholeheartedly trusted his intuition. There was no such thing as a paranoid shinobi, and for a damn good reason. And right now his senses told him he was being followed. Naruto kept walking onwards, but slowly tilted his head, using his long bangs to cover glancing out the corner of his eye. Behind him he saw normal people going about their business, not a single person stood out as suspect to him. His gaze traveled upwards and his eye narrowed as it zeroed in on the rooftops. Of course, the height advantage would provide significant cover and surveillance. He turned his attention forward, keeping his pace steady and his form relaxed not to draw attention to himself. His single eye darted around, looking for anything that might provide as a distraction. Like an active kami, some construction workers were walking slowly down the street carrying heavy sacks of dirt. Naruto grinned underneath his mask and focused chakra discreetly to his index finger. A small spinning ball of chakra formed. With a flick of his finger, the ball sailed through the air unnoticed, and hit the bag of dirt, exploding it in the middle of the street, startling civilians and shinobi alike in the vicinity. A thick cloud of smoke caused those nearby to start coughing, and people quickly moved away from the dirt cloud. Naruto shoved his hands in his pockets, walking forward through the cloud without a care in the world. His form became covered briefly before he emerged, lightly dusting off any accumulated dust. He continued forward, pulling out his book and adapting his customary lazy slouch. The military police were quickly on the scene, clearing onlookers out the way. Covered in dirt, the worker looked utterly miserable as he got a tongue lashing from one of the officers trying to explain how the bag suddenly exploded in his hands. No one saw the distortion that quickly leapt to the rooftops. Under the camouflage of the transparency jutsu, Naruto's shadow clone watched the original slowly make his way down the street. His lone eye darted around the rooftops, trying to catch the presence he felt when he was on ground level. He glanced at the rooftops, seeing nothing but normal buildings and the occasional shinobi. Whoever it was, he was good. As adept as he was at sensing chakra, nothing was out of the ordinary on the rooftops. No flicker, or movements. Just the blowing wind that he would have missed if it wasn't for the layer of dust that floated upwards from the dust cloud. It spilled over on a roof, settling on the concrete like a blanket of sand. He smiled thinly as footprints became visible before a light breeze came and blew the dust away, letting it flicker into the wind. Bingo! Naruto thought to himself. Whoever was using that camouflage jutsu didn't take into account their surroundings. Always mind your surroundings. His hand lifted to rest on his headband, and the world soon focused into sharp clarity. His eye narrowed as he saw the distinct chakra flow of the figure. From the way his chakra flowed, Naruto could tell the figure's form was crouched, fixated on his original, making his way through the streets. His Sharingan spun rapidly in his eye, focusing sharper and sharper till the figure's form became distinctly visible. Soon enough Naruto could see the workings of the figure's outline. His mouth formed a line under his mask. He began to suppress his chakra, disappearing in a body flicker. In a flicker of movement he was behind the figure, seemingly unaware of his presence. He cut off the flow of chakra to the transparency jutsu and his form became visible again to the naked eye. Blissfully ignorant to the danger, the figure stayed crouched, watching as the real Naruto continued his lazy stroll. His form paused in the distance and he held up his hands just in time to catch a familiar blonde blur crashing into him. Lucky bastard, isn't he? Naruto said lightly. He glanced at the woman in his arms. Look at that ass. The figure instantly leapt to his side, gaining distance between the two of them and at the same time drawing his tanto. Now up close could see his outline more clearly and deduced he was a man. The male spread his legs a bit, keeping his knees bent and his body poised. Naruto noticed it was a perfect act of balance, giving the unidentified man movement to suddenly attack or flee if necessary. You might as well drop the jutsu, Naruto stated calmly. I can see you perfectly. The figure did not do as requested, only choosing to stay poised, his masked face never straying from Naruto's relaxed form. The figure turned his head slightly, as if weighing his options. Naruto's hand came to rest on the hilt of his sword, slowly drawing the blade with the sound of sliding metal. Why are you following me? The figure didn't react, but Naruto could see his fingers tighten on his small tanto. Every distinct shift of his muscles, every twitch of tension in his body, the image of his next movement was visible clear to his eye. The figure stayed coiled, but his hand discreetly went to his pouch. The tomos spun rapidly before slowing in his eye, and he blitzed forward, sword poised for a strike before the figure could throw down the smoke bomb in his hand. His sword strike was blocked, but his free arm lashed out to halt the arm that held the bomb. If any passerby took time to look, they would see the strange sight of Naruto seemingly grabbing nothing but air. Naruto ran lighting chakra through his arm, and the figure let out a hiss as his chakra flow became disturbed and the camouflage jutsu around his form dropped. Momentarily stunned, he wasn't prepared for the hand that latched around his neck. Naruto's eyes narrowed, and with an impressive display of raw strength flipped the now identified root agent and smashed him into the ground. The smoke bomb in his hand exploded from impact, and the thick cloud enveloped the entire rooftop. Naruto could feel the rapidly closing chakra signatures coming to investigate as the smoke spread out into the air. He glanced at the stunned root agent and waited for the seal he had planted on his neck to solidify. Stomping on the man's neck harshly, he held up a hand in the ram sign and focused his chakra, ignoring the way the agent struggled against the foot crushing his throat. He had to close his eyes in concentration as he felt his chakra finally grasp out to seal he had placed, and in his mind the picture of a room appeared, the seal placed on the wall pulsing as his chakra connected with it. An Umbu patrol quickly appeared on the scene as the smoke evaporated, staring in confusion at an empty rooftop. What was that? Riha questioned, glancing at the rooftop that had suddenly exploded into smoke. Seconds later, a team of Umbu appeared as the smoke evaporated. Naruto glanced at the roof in question with a lazy eye. Ma, just some kids playing a prank. Riha didn't respond, only staring at the roof curiously before she turned her attention back on the streets, idly watching people walk by. So how was your mission? Naruto asked, wrapping an arm around her. Riha lightly hummed to herself in thought, absently stroking the arm around her shoulders. Just a plain old B-rank. She sighed. It was so boring. Had to lead a squad of Chunin on a military-based patrol, you know, the one near the capital? Naruto nodded, stroking his chin. That does sound boring. She clicked her tongue. I don't know what was worse, the mission itself, or the whole squad of Chunin that were constantly trying to flirt. She shook her head, lightly resting it on Naruto's arm. Naruto just chuckled lightly. Flirting, eh? Can't blame them. I mean, have you seen your ass? Riha giggled. They can look, but no touching is allowed. Her baby blues glanced up at him. Only one person gets that privilege. Naruto grinned. Lucky me. He leaned down and pressed a kiss against her lips, uncaring that his mask was still on. Not that Riha minded anyways. They continued on in silence before Riha perked up. Where are we heading? She questioned. Naruto glanced down at her. Well, I'm heading to the Sarutobi clan compound. I don't know where you're going. She pouted at him. Can't I come, Naruto-kun? Rolling his eye, he slowly shook his head before nodding in acceptance, causing her to grin. Soon enough, the large gates of the Sarutobi clan entrance came into view, bearing their distinct clan symbol. The kanji for a monkey was bared proudly as the two blondes stood before the impressive gates. Respectfully greeting the gate guards, Naruto bowed politely. The two guards saluted his greeting before they gestured him passage. Naruto continued forward, but Riha was stopped by one of the dark-haired guards. Sorry ma'am, but I cannot allow you entrance. She frowned and her eyes met Naruto's as he sheepishly scratched his cheek. Ma, my bad Riha-chan. They don't allow strangers, and I'm short of an honored guest. He chuckled at her narrowed eyes. Just chill out here for a bit, I won't be long. She pouted but nodded in acceptance nonetheless. Crossing her arms under her chest, she watched Naruto continue forward into compound. Walking with his hands shoved his pockets, Naruto took in the scenery of the beautiful clan grounds. Spanning nearly 3 kilometers, the Sarutobi clan was one of the largest in Konoha, second in size only to the Hyuga. Trees layered the grounds, and in the distance Naruto could see a large jungle forest, seemingly home to some of the monkeys that the clan bred. His sightseeing was halted as he came before the main house. A large mansion ingrained with the clan symbol, the main house stood proud and imposing, its deep history rooting all the way to the times when Konoha was first built. Its beauty was truly magnificent as the red oak glistened in the afternoon sun. The wood was personally made from the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju himself, as a gift to clan. What had caused him to halt were the shouting voices that were audible from all the way outside. "I don't give a fuck. You hear me? I don't give a fuck." That sounded a lot like Kanemaru. But Naruto had rarely heard the young Sarutobi so angry. "Watch your mouth, boy. I am the leader of this clan. If you don't like that, then leave." Now that was the grizzled voice of the third shouting back in equal ferocity. His voice even louder than Konohamaru's. The front doors of the mansion was kicked open and a furious Konohamaru stormed out. "Fine, old man." The third trailed behind him, clad in his Hokage robes but missing his distinct hat. "This conversation isn't over, boy." "Konohamaru." Hiruzen made to grab his arm, but was pushed back and nearly sent to the ground from a furious shove. Red eyes glared back at him as Konohamaru bared his teeth. "Don't fucking touch me, old man." Their loud voices were causing quite a scene and soon clansmen were surrounding their form. Guards tried to help compose the third but he waved them off. He pointed a finger at the angry Jinchuriki. "Listen here, and listen well. I will not be made a fool of in front of my clan." He pointed to the house. "You can either go back inside, and we can finish this conversation civilly, or you can throw a tantrum like a child and be forcefully restrained." Konohamaru stared numbly at him before his red eyes seemed to glow and his form began to shake. "Listen to yourself, old man. You make it sound like the bullshit you're sprouting is the actual truth." Hiruzen sighed. "Listen, Konohamaru, I do what I must for this." "No, you listen, old man." Konohamaru marched right up into his face, causing those around the third to back up in fright. "Fuck you. Fuck Danzu. And fuck this piece of shit village." He emphasized each word with a finger poking against his chest and finally exploded with another shove that the third was prepared for as he only stepped back. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes. "Take care, my young grandson. I won't hesitate to charge you with heresy." Konohamaru smiled humorlessly. "Yeah, of course you would treat family like that." His voice broke. "And no wonder Dad left." He turned on his heels, stomping away from the third, missing the way the old man flinched. Sarutobi members hissed at the display of disrespect and looked ready to intervene, but the third simply held up his hands, stopping them. Konohamaru caught Naruto's form and he slowly walked to stand before him. His eyes were no longer red but teary-eyed and his body was shaking. Naruto wordlessly wrapped an arm around him and the young boy rested his head against his vest, crying. Naruto glanced at the third, seeing the old man watching the duo before their gazes locked. They stared at each other for a few seconds before the third broke eye contact and made his way back into the main house. Naruto wordlessly directed Konohamaru forward to the gates before glancing at the crying boy. "You want to talk about it, Ko?" Konohamaru wordlessly shook his head in response, using his long scarf to dry his tears. They walked in silence, eventually arriving before the clan gates. The guards quickly became alarmed seeing the clan heir in such a state, but their concerns were waved off by Konohamaru. Riha was patiently waiting, leaning on the clan walls for support, but quickly perked up at seeing the two. "Hey Konohamaru-kun, how's it going?" She walked up to the two but quickly lost her smile as she saw his teary eyes. "What's wrong, Ko-kun?" The young Genin didn't answer, only vainly trying to wipe away his seemingly endless tears with his scarf. Riha glanced at Naruto, but he could only shrug. "What happened?" she questioned telepathically. He and the old man were having a serious argument. Naruto answered back. "It was quite nasty." Riha only nodded before she enveloped the young boy in a warm hug, lightly stroking his brown hair as he began to shake with silent cries. Tenderly his arms came to rest around her waist and his form seemed to tremble in her arms. She soothingly hushed his cries, softly running her fingers through his hair, holding him tight against her. She bent her head, whispering low enough for only his ears. "Let it out, Ko." Her hand rubbed small circles in his back. Soon enough his cries settled down and his shaking stopped. Over the top of his head Riha caught Naruto's raised brow and she silently giggled at his confusion. A woman's touch, she conveyed. She felt Konohamaru stir slightly and he loosened his grip around her waist, withdrawing himself from her warm embrace. She gently smiled at him before stroking his cheek. You feel better now, Kokuin? The genin blushed despite his embarrassment but nodded nonetheless. You want to talk about it, Konohamaru? Naruto repeated his last question, watching the young genin silently enjoy Riha's soft ministrations. The old man. He started with a whisper. He wants me to start my duties as the heir for the clan. Naruto frowned underneath his mask. The young Sarutobi was in fact the clan heir. His young age and his status could only mean one thing. He wants you to marry. Naruto finished. Konohamaru nodded. He wants to set up an arranged marriage for me when I turn 16. Even more, he wants when I become a Chunin to quit shinobi life and become a full-time clan heir. He gritted his teeth. That's when I told him to go fuck himself. Naruto sighed, painfully resisting the urge to march back into the Sarutobi compound. And then he thought about it. Konohamaru's body couldn't contain the Kyuubi. Something that couldn't be contained would eventually break out. His mind is strong but his body is weak. He remembered the Kyuubi's words from inside his mindscape. The third knew that the inevitable would happen and was probably trying to make his life worth it. Naruto could understand that. He had to watch his grandson slowly die and he wanted him to experience life before his demise. The suffering he was soon going to be subjected to would be torture. His mind remembered vividly the amount of pain the young genin was in just from accessing the chakra shroud, but from his expression it would seem that Konohamaru didn't even know about his condition. Naruto stopped himself. He didn't have the heart to tell him. At least not right now, and so openly exposed. Gazing at those wide brown eyes, his resolve hardened. He wouldn't allow it. Glancing down at his stomach, he could picture the seal his father had sacrificed his life to place on him. All he would need to is the key from Jiraiya. Naruto made a silent promise that very moment, Konohamaru would live. He would make sure of that. Rubbing the top of the boy's spiky hair affectionately, he smiled. Cheer up, Ko. Don't worry about that stuff, I'll take care of everything, okay? Konohamaru tenderly nodded before a small smile began to form on his face. Naruto grinned. Now, let's head to the training ground. We're already late for a team meeting. Konohamaru nodded before he turned to Riha, who had been respectfully quiet the whole time. You coming, Riha-chan? She smiled before she gestured to Naruto. I don't know, Kokuin, you'll have to ask your sensei. When big brown eyes turned to him, Naruto sighed. Fine. He acquiesced. The genin grinned up at Riha, who returned his smile, and to Naruto's amusement bent down to press a soft kiss against his cheeks, giggling when his face turned red. They all began to walk together, Naruto reading his book, and Konohamaru holding hands with Riha, who giggled as he told her some jokes. Naruto stared at them out of the corner of his eye, smiling fondly at the pair. It would seem Konohamaru did indeed need a woman's touch. The young boy had lost his mother during the Kyuubi attack, his file indicating he had watched her get crushed under their collapsing house. His father had been missing for years after venturing off to the lands of his summons. He had questioned the third previously over the subject, but the old man wasn't ready to talk about losing another one of his sons, counting the fact that his last one had little respect for him. And for what he had overheard, the man had left because of his father. Even though he had his clan, Konohamaru's status no doubt provided him with hidden scorn and rejection. He had seen the way some of his own clan members were looking at him. That look of fear was strong in their eyes. Sensei. Naruto focused on the young genin. Weren't we supposed to talk about the... He trailed off, glancing at Riha, who smiled softly at him. Don't worry, I know, Ko. The young genin jumped at the voice in his head but returned her smile. You want to talk about it? Naruto questioned. He had almost forgotten, but if the young boy wanted to, he wouldn't deny him. With his nod, Naruto walked closer to Riha and intertwined her free hand with his, allowing her to link their minds. Okay, let's talk. The image of all three of them walking hand in hand painted the picture of a small family, but nobody seemed to notice. So do you remember what happened? Naruto started. Konohamaru slowly shook his head, his form slumped as he remembered the events. I remember some parts but not everything. I was fighting that boy. Wait, how did he have the Kyuubi's chakra? Naruto narrowed his eye. His father sealed some of the Kyuubi's chakra into him the day it attacked. Konohamaru's mouth was open in shock before his eyes seemed to grow distant in memory. Naruto gently nudged him, seeing his look. Konohamaru, oh right, where was I? Angry. I was getting angry. Really angry. I could feel so much hatred, so much malevolence. I was going to kill him. He glanced at Naruto with wide eyes. And then you came and you used those chains. You can suppress the Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto nodded. Yep, it's a special ability of mine. Konohamaru looked starstruck. Wow, that's so cool, sensei. A frown marred his face. Everything after that went black. I can't remember anything. What happened? Naruto sighed. You went to a four-tailed state. You lost all sense of rationality and control and attacked me. Konohamaru flinched. Did I hurt you? Naruto stared directly in his eyes before he decided to be truthful. No. You didn't hurt me, the Kyuubi did. Hands nearly got corroded off. Konohamaru smiled nervously at his words before he lost his expression and his eyes swelled with dread. What about Sora? You killed him. The young boy, being emaciated, was forever burned into his mind. Konohamaru slumped against Riha and she wrapped an arm around him in support. Don't forget, Konohamaru, you had to kill him anyway. Naruto stated. He would have died that night either way. Konohamaru looked miserable. I know. But I know the destruction I'm capable of in my four-tailed state. I mean, I almost killed you, didn't I? Naruto stroked his chin in thought. It's nothing worse than what Riha-chan can do. He said smugly, meeting her narrowed eyes. Talk about vicious, I'll take on a tailed beast any day, rather than having to come home and deal with that. He pointed at Riha for emphasis. Konohamaru laughed and Riha's eyes narrowed to slits as Naruto continued. I mean, you should see her in the morning. That's a sight I wouldn't wish on my most hated enemy. The telepathic conversation was broken as her anger began to rise. Konohamaru slowly began to edge away from the furious-looking blonde. I always thought rumors of women looking terrible in mornings was untrue, but the first time I saw it for myself I thought, hot damn, did a severe case of fugly take a shit on your face while I was asleep? I smiled at her. Had to scramble for some toilet paper to get that stuff off, right, Riha-chan? Twack! Two figures instantly appeared from a dimensional void, one hitting the ground harshly and other stumbling on his feet. Naruto's shadow clone took a few seconds to steady himself before he lightly shook his head. Geez, I'm still sloppy on the landing. The agent he had transported used his momentum to roll to his feet. His hand reached for his tanto, but he realized he had dropped it when Naruto had slammed him to ground on the rooftop. Naruto sheathed his sword, ominously cracking his knuckles as his Sharingan glowed in the darkness that enshrouded the room they were in. Well, now it's just me and you. He bared his canines under his mask. No interruptions. The agent took time to survey his surroundings, seeing they were in a large room that resembled something of an apartment. The gray walls were bare and there were no visible windows or anything to identify their location. In the center of the room were sets of plain couches and a small coffee table. Behind Naruto he could see a small kitchen. Where have you transported me? The agent finally spoke, his voice unidentifiable by the voice-altering software in his mask. He knew that whatever jutsu the Jonin had used had been space-time, as they entered a dark void of some sort and were transported here faster than the blink of an eye. Naruto slowly walked forward. Wouldn't you like to know? The agent slowly stepped back with each step Naruto took and was suddenly stopped as his back hit a door. Naruto chose to stop walking, and that was all the agent needed to open the door and leap out, only for his eyes to widen and his mouth to open in a silent scream as he fell into a void of endless black. He glanced backward and saw the rapidly fading visage of the blonde poking his head out of the door for what seemed like an apartment unit seemingly floating in the endless darkness. He saw a brilliant golden flash and a chain of pure gold wrapped around his ankle. The agent palmed a kunai and ran his chakra through it, trying to cut the metal, but it seemed virtually unbreakable. His attempts were in vain as the chain began to shorten and the floating apartment came closer and closer. Soon enough he was hauled up to doorway, left hanging by his ankle, watching a smug Naruto glance down at him. Well, to answer your question, we're in a pocket dimension. I must say you're the only bastard who ever jumped. Most poor bastards were just thrown out the door. He tilted his head. The void is infinite, so sometimes I hear them scream for a long time. The agent threw his kunai, but Naruto simply tilted his head, allowing the blade to fly by harmlessly. His Sharingan narrowed as he saw the burst of chakra and he turned in time to block the strike to his head, as the agent finished utilizing a replacement with the kunai he had just thrown. "You're good." The agent replied in form of gripping his arm and returning the favor, flipping Naruto and using the momentum to throw him out the door. Naruto threw his hands forward, two chains flashing out and attaching to the ends of the door. Underneath his mask the agent's eyes widened as Naruto propelled himself forward with his chains, and didn't have time to react as he was speared, knocking the breath out of him. They both tumbled into the apartment, Naruto rolling the agent with his momentum and sliding to his feet, tossing the man against the wall. The agent hit the wall feet first, reinforcing his legs with chakra before he rocketed off, engaging Naruto in a fierce battle of taijutsu. The agent jabbed forward, Naruto ducking under the blow, rocketing upwards with an uppercut that sent the man flying. Using the force of the blow, the agent flipped himself, landing on his feet. He didn't have time to react as Naruto was suddenly in front of him, lashing out with a kick that sent him crashing against the stone walls. Beneath his mask the agent's eyes widened and he ducked in time to miss the fist that smashed straight through the wall where his head had been. He palmed a kunai and struck forward, but a hand halted the appendage. Naruto's knee lifted to knock the knife out of the man's hand into the air, and he smashed a fist against the pale mask and finished with a spinning kick that sent the man crashing into the couches. Without a pause he held up his hand, catching the knife as it fell into his open palm and twirled it lazily, watching the man as he struggled to his feet. "As I mentioned, you're good. Really good. But I'm better." The agent couldn't disagree as fingered the long crack that had formed in his mask. With a flick of his wrist Naruto sent the knife flying and the agent ducked in time to miss having his head pierced. Naruto watched the man slowly rise to his feet, his form panting from the exertion. "Why don't you just give up? You can take off your mask and let me torture you, or you can continue this fight resulting in me kicking your ass sideways. Then I torture you." The agent knew he was fighting a loosened battle and quickly reached for his utility pouch. When he felt nothing he saw Naruto hold up a small brown pack, shaking it innocently back and forth. "Missing something?" The agent blitzed forward and Naruto readied himself, but his eyes narrowed as the man turned at the last second and made a mad dash for the door. The bastard wanted to suicide. Naruto's speed was simply too great and a chain shot out of his hand, ensnaring the man before the man could reach it. Using his own momentum against him, Naruto pulled on the chain with all his strength, rocketing the man towards him. The man didn't have time to gasp as a fist smashed against his mask, shattering it from the force, and he was sent sailing through the air before he hit the concrete walls with a crack. Naruto lowered his arm, retracting his chain, lightly dusting himself off, and slowly began to walk forward. He stood before the unconscious-looking man, lying face first on the ground. Another chain slowly snaked out of his arm and wrapped around the man's neck, hauling him into the air. Auburn locks spilled downwards as his head hung downwards. His face was bruised and his lips busted, dropping blood from his previous blow. Naruto's eye narrowed to slits and he had to rein control of his chain lest the man's neck snap. Danza's #1 lackey. He wordlessly turned on his heel and began to head for his torture room, uncaring of the mess that had tarnished the living room. The chain kept up its grip, bringing Fu with him as he came before a large door and pressed his hand against it, letting his chakra flow. A seal materialized on the door and it opened, revealing a dark room filled with only small chair highlighted by a single swaying light bulb. Naruto walked forward and willed his chain to set the unconscious man in his custom-made torture chair. Using the chakra-reinforced metal arm and leg straps he bonded the man to the chair, securing him in place. He glanced at him momentarily before his hand flashed out, slapping the man harshly into consciousness. Fu stirred slightly before his eyes snapped awake and instantly focused on Naruto. "Hope you had a nice nap, sunshine." Naruto I smiled. "'Cause I'm about to fuck you up." Fu's amber eyes were blank, his face void of any emotion as he stared his soon-to-be torturer down. Naruto lost his smile and he fixated the man with an equally blank glance. His Sharingan glowed in the dark, all the more menacing by the swaying bulb that highlighted his features momentarily before allowing the dark to shadow his face. "You know, when people torture, they always tend to get physical." He started slowly, beginning to circle around the chair. "They usually start with the little parts, fingers, toes, eyes, mouth, roughly all the small stuff. That's usually to soften them up. I can personally say it's always the weak-minded that have the loose tongues." His stride was slow, ominously circling around the helpless man like a stalking shark. "Then there's the strong-willed type. Those who you would classify that don't break under conventional means." He smirked, seeing the man's eyes flicker. "Those types can go through days of physical torture and they still won't talk. He stopped standing in front of the man. It's quite simple really. It's a testament to their power of will to endure and turn suffering to their own advantage. That's why most prisoners are simply killed, because they simply can't be broken. The worst mistake a torturer can ever commit is starting with the body. You're at your most dangerous when you can subject people to great suffering without ever using physical torture. Complete and total knowledge of human psychology. Naruto, by attacking a person's mind, you gain control over their spirit. Ibiki's words ran through his mind as he remembered his brief time under the man's tutelage. A finger tapped Fu's head. I, on the other hand, do not rely on such crude physical measures. I start with the mind. The body can't exist without the mind. His smirked. The mind breaks, the body will follow. You Root are said to be strong-willed, having the mindset of perfect tools. His Sharingan glowed. Well, let's find out how much you can endure. Fu didn't react, but Naruto could see the sweat that was beginning to form on his brow. His Sharingan glanced down at his wrist, seeing the elevated pulse. He smirked at the man before he gestured to walls around him. These walls are layered with seals that heighten genjutsu. His Sharingan slowly twirled. With my Sharingan you could almost say that in here I have my very own Tsukuyomi. Fu snapped his eyes shut at the mention of the word, but Naruto just slowly smirked. A little too late. They had already made eye contact. Fu's eyes snapped open and his body went still as both men stared at each other. Naruto's brow furrowed as Fu's body gave a jerk. He was a Yamanaka, eh? This would be a little challenging. Their staring contest ensued for a few minutes, Naruto's eyes occasionally twitching and Fu's body giving a slight jerk. The more time passed, the more Naruto's eyes twitched and soon sweat was beginning to form on his brow. Not to say Fu was in any better condition. Despite his blank features, his body was soaked with sweat and his eyes were dangerously twitching. An hour passed and the mind penetration battle was still going strong. Fu's mind was resilient, trained to block out all intrusions. Naruto had tried to do things the way of a certain Uchiha, copying his style, trying to be fluid, carefully picking apart his mind. But Itachi had always been a master of genjutsu and Naruto knew there was no comparison, so he did it his way. Fu didn't make a sound, but his mouth opened in a silent scream as his mind was viciously attacked. His mental fortitude couldn't withstand the raw brute strength of Naruto's attacks and he began to shake as his mental foundations began to crumble. Naruto's Sharingan glowed and his eyes tightened as he continued his vicious assault. Almost. He could feel the man breaking. Being subjected to his will. A little longer was all it would need. The agent gritted his teeth, his features were no longer able to keep up the blank state. A stubborn one he was. Admirable but foolish. Tired of keeping this up for so long, Naruto nearly overloaded himself with his chakra as he sent a final attack at the man's mind. Fu's eyes widened and his nose began to bleed as he let out a scream of pain as his mental blocks were broken, causing a blood vessel in his brain to burst. Naruto grinned as the man slumped into unconsciousness. Fu slowly opened his eyes before closing them in pain as he remembered the vicious mental assaults he had just been subjected to. His form was panting and his body felt like it had just gone through a marathon. He slowly lifted his head, glancing around at his surroundings. He was still in the chair, but he was in a completely different environment. Glancing around in confusion, he stared at the empty room he was in before loud voices caught his attention. No! I won't allow it. The voice sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. Be reasonable. This is for the greater good. This voice was quieter but had a deadly tone to it. Fu instantly recognized his master's voice. They're just children, Danzu. How could you want to do this to innocent lives? He heard what sounded like a scoff before he heard a sigh. I understand your concern, Inoichi. But these two are very promising. Their talents would be wasted in the academy. Root will allow them to flourish and become perfect soldiers for Konoha. Inoichi sighed. Kami, Danzu, listen to yourself for 1 second. Does the Hokage even know about your child soldiers? It was quiet for a few moments. Namikaze will soon be dead in a few years. He won't be a threat. What? What the hell are you talking about? Is Minato's life in danger? Answer me. You have no need to worry. His voice was smug. Namikaze is a thorn in both of our sides and I gave him some information that he needed. What have you done, Danzu? I did what I had to do, survive. It was either my life or his. What the fuck are you talking about, Danzu? Fu felt a build of chakra and realized that the Yamanaka clan leader was preparing to fight. Are you threatening me with lethal intent, Inoichi? Danzu's voice was quiet. Answer me. There was a shuffling of movement and he felt a brief chakra spike. This time from Danzu. His limited sensing abilities felt Inoichi's chakra become disturbed. Almost if he was. Forget about this conversation. If we're lucky, things will go smoothly and the master will have the Kyubi under his control. There was another rustle of movement. Good. Now call the children. Inoichi sighed before his voice rang out. Fu, come here please. And bring your sister too. Small feet were heard running and the sounds came closer before they stopped. Inoichi-sama. Fu flinched at the sound of his voice. Who's this? There was an intense silence again. Just follow him, children. Inoichi sounded broken. Their footsteps came closer to the room he was in and Fu flinched as the door was opened and man followed by two small bodies entered. Amber eyes stared in shock at his 7-year-old self as the young boy seemingly walked in his direction. His younger sister hesitantly traveled behind him. Fu's eyes widened as the both siblings phased through him like he was intangible, making their way to lean against the wall behind him. A younger-looking Danzu closed the door behind him, readying the bandages around his head. His younger form didn't suffer the limp that plagues his older years. Standing beside him were two unidentifiable figures, the trio all cloaked in black. Hello, children. My name is Danzu. He greeted. Fu nodded before he returned the greeting. I'm Fu. He gestured to the blue-eyed blonde beside him. This is my sister. Say hi. The young girl seemed to curl herself onto her brother's shirt. Hi. Danzu resisted the urge to frown. Such behavior would have to be quickly disciplined. Nevertheless, he smiled. It's a pleasure to meet the both of you. He tilted his head, his lone eye roaming over their faces. I have come before you two today, to recruit the both of you to my private Umbu faction. Fu glanced at his sister before his eyes narrowed at Danzu. Why would you want us? We're just starting the academy, his brow creased. I mean, we're only kids. Danzu smiled thinly. Yes, you are just children. But in time you will grow. I will train you till you stand as adults, perfect soldiers unmatched in all areas of the shinobi arts. True soldiers of Konoha. You would be doing your village a great service. Fu had his eyes wide and seemed to be starstruck. Wow, that sounds so cool. He turned to his sister. What do you think, sis? The young girl only nodded, hesitantly staring at Danzu as he smirked. Splendid. He gestured for them to follow, his two guards traveling behind him. They exited the room to see the red eyes of the clan head staring at them with emotion they couldn't identify. They have agreed, Inoichi. I'll be taking them. He wordlessly walked past the silent man but was stopped when he felt a hand on his shoulder. Take care of them, they're my sister's only children. Danzu wordlessly nodded and moved forward when the hand dropped from his shoulder. The imposing agents followed their master out the house, but Inoichi's soft whisper caught the attention of the two children. Fu, watch out for your sister. The young boy nodded. The young girl seemed conflicted before she ran up to him and gave him a hug. Bye, uncle. I'll miss you. Inoichi bent down to hug the girl, softly stroking her hair as tears spilled down his eyes. Riha-chan. The world suddenly shifted and Fu gasped as he found himself back inside of Naruto's torture room. Before he could take time to gasp for air, a hand crushed his throat. Naruto's form was shaking with fury as lighting sparked around him. His Sharingan burned brightly and his normal eye took on an icy hue. Riha is your fucking sister. Fu didn't answer. Rather, he couldn't, as his face was turning purple from the lack of oxygen. He wasn't sure if his neck was going to break or lose consciousness before Naruto released his grip. He heaved, sucking in the much-needed oxygen greedily as his form slumped into the chair. Naruto paced around the room muttering under his breath. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. Riha. The blonde that he had thought was a gift from Kami was the sister to a fucking rude agent. He pulled at his hair, wondering why he never saw the signs. His form leaned against a wall for support. They had been together for as long as he had his team. Doing the math, he deduced they'd been together for something close to 6 months. So how the fuck could he have not seen any signs? Not even his ninja hounds had sensed any bad vibes from her. She was a gift in his life, the woman he had always wanted. She was loved by his team, his friends, his hounds, she was loved by everybody. She was perf. Look underneath the underneath. Naruto's eyes widened before he began to shake so hard Fu thought the blonde was having a seizure. With a roar Naruto punched the wall so hard his fist went right through the concrete. His head thumped against the wall and his form seemed to slump, drained of all energy. She was perfect. Fucking perfect. Look underneath the underneath. He didn't want to. Even if he saw it, all was ignored in favor of finally being rid of the loneliness that had plagued him for so long. He smashed his head against the wall. Not hard enough to cause him to dispel but enough to make his head hurt. And not only that, Danzo knew of the Kyuubi attack. And planned for his father's death? With the Kyuubi under someone's control, his form shook so violently with rage he nearly caused himself to dispel. Fu gasped when dual-colored eyes pinned him with killing intent so palpable he nearly choked. Alright, forget taking my time, Naruto walked up to stand in front of the man. I need you to start talking. Now. Naruto flexed his fingers before he held up his thumb and index finger. A blue flume appeared on each digit causing the dark room to illuminate in its light. Knowing what he planned, Fu immediately tried to bite off his own tongue but a hand pressed against his forehead and a seal appeared. His body failed to obey his commands and he found himself paralyzed. Naruto forced his mouth open and tilted his head back. He grabbed the man's tongue holding the muscle out focusing on the small seal that materialized. Fu could do nothing but scream as the two flaming fingers pressed against his tongue and began to burn away the cursed seal that Danzo had placed. Despite having no emotion, his eyes burned with an unfamiliar wetness as the excruciating pain reached a new heights as Naruto focused more chakra to his fingers and the flames grew in size, lighting up the darkness in a blinding light. Fu screamed from the back of his throat. After what felt like an eternity, the pain subsided as Naruto cut off the flow of chakra to his fingers and removed his digits. He removed the hand holding the man's head, allowing it to drop lifelessly to his side. The root agent was left heaving, his mouth hanging open, tears flowing down his eyes as his mouth steamed. Naruto flexed his fingers allowing the steaming digits to cool before he dusted his hands off. Right. I need you to focus on me, Fu. The man was too busy heaving in pain to focus on Naruto's words. Slick. Fu lurched harshly and his back arched as far as the chair could allow him as his scream penetrated the walls around him. His heaving form focused on the kunai buried to the hilt in his knee. So deep was the knife that it had went straight through the bone and cartilage jutting out on the other side of his knee pit. Naruto tightened the grip on the handle letting the blade slide deeper, ignoring the way the man screamed. He roughly slapped the man seeing him thrash around. Focus. Hey! I need you focus right here. He pointed to his face, jamming the knife down, and Fu's teary eyes finally turned to him. Good. He raised himself to his full height leaving the knife embedded into the man as he glared at him. I only have enough chakra to sustain me for a few hours. Roughly 9 to be exact. He pointed to the walls. But like I mentioned, because of those seals, in here is my very own Tsukiyomi. Fu's broken eyes turned to the walls and he saw the ethereal glow of elaborate seal designs on the surrounding walls. Each one of those 8 seals alter the perception of time, by about, give or take, 7 or 8 hours. He trailed off. You can do the math. The question was rhetorical as he gathered chakra to his eye, the seals glowing at the excessive amounts of chakra. Now let's see how long it takes before your mind breaks. Fu screamed as Naruto invaded the deepest corners of his mind. That's it for part 4. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.